Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Juubi Naruto was in Harry Potter. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Kolarthecool, link in description, and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 Rewritten Merge. Juubi the Tentailed demon god was battling its most powerful opponent to date, an opponent many immortals over the years struggled against. Boredom. It had been close to 5 millennia since its second and most favorable host had died, Uzumaki Naruto. The boy that had saved all the nations and brought about decades of peace and unity to the world. Juubi had at first hated its host after the boy had defeated that cursed Uchiha and sealed all 9 Biju within his own body, but after a few years of absorbing the boy's thoughts, memories and emotions, the demon god had grown to care for him like a parent would their child. After the boy's death, that blasted fool Shinigami had dragged both their souls into the underworld. Well, that didn't sit well with Juubi. Using its immeasurable power and the techniques it had absorbed from Madara and the Rikudo Sennin, Juubi killed and absorbed the souls of countless greater demons within hell to increase its own power. After an epic and monumental battle with both Shinigami and Kami, he had defeated both and asserted himself as ruler of the realms. Their battle, however, had great consequences on the 5 realms. Heaven, the celestial realm; Earth, the middle plane; Hell, the lower pits; Makai, the demon realm; and Gaia, the summon world, had all clashed and fused together due to the amount of power the 3 gods had released. Countless summons, humans and demons, had died only to reappear in the same realm as spirits. After its monumental battle, Juubi had set out to split the realms, and while he was able to recreate the 2 realms for the dead, the fusion between the other 3 was unrepairable even for one with his power. Eventually time passed, demons, humans and summons lived in peace as their numbers grew. Soon, though, the numbers began to drop for the mythical beasts as the humans continued to grow and spread. That brought about the world of today. The demons of old were now weak monsters and half-breeds or creatures of low-level power. The grand and terrific summons were replaced by smaller, weaker creatures. Yokai had been weakened over the years by the crossbreeding of species. Now even the most powerful of demonkind could be defeated by a powerful human. As for the ninja, they had been replaced by witches and wizards. Chakra was now called magic and was now less potent than it had been at one time. Now only humans descended from the clans of old had the ability to wield chakra, and yet they needed an object of great power to focus their abilities. Saturday, October 31st, 1981. Juubi sighed as it drifted through the endless void it had come to call its home. It had been ages since it last walked upon the realms. Over a millennium ago it had settled into the deepest recesses of hell and closed its eyes to sleep. Now, after a millennium of slumber, it was awakened by a disturbance in the mortal realm. Deciding to once more gaze into the mortal realm, the demon god opened a viewing portal and focused on the source of the disturbance. On the other end of the portal were 4 dead bodies. One had been reduced to ash and belonged to a powerful human, a descendant of the foul snake Sennin, no doubt, from what he could sense. The other bodies were what caused him to growl in anger. Lying dead around the house were the 2 bodies of Uzumaki Naruto's last descendants. The male had been killed by the snake man, while the last one, the young boy, had died due to smoke from the burning house. Juubi frowned as it watched this. It had promised Naruto to watch after his descendants when the man had died, and it would not break a promise. The Uzumaki line would never die out as long as Juubi drew breath. The child would live and carry on the Uzumaki line, no matter what. For the first time in over a millennium, Juubi stirred, its power stretched and expanded within the 3 realms, seeking the spirit of one Harry James Potter. All around the world, magical creatures gazed up in awe at the amount of power flowing through the world. Even the oldest and most powerful of creatures trembled before the power they felt as it washed over and through them. The realms ripped and tore as Juubi searched for the boy's soul. After a few minutes of searching, Juubi found what it sought. Grabbing hold of Harry Potter's soul, the demon god dragged it through the realms back to his body. It smiled as the small body breathed once more and set up a minor barrier to protect the child. After a few moments, a shaggy black-haired man burst into the building. The man tearfully regarded the 2 other bodies before scooping up the child and rushing out from the burning building. Juubi watched as the child was then handed over to a half-breed summonkind, who then flew off with the child. It grinned and watched as the boy was handed to an old man and woman. The old man and woman placed the boy within a basket and left him at the doorstep of a quaint little home. Juubi spent several minutes watching the child. It looked into the boy's future and frowned at what it saw. Left unattended, the boy would suffer a life of pain and sorrow much like his ancestor. While Naruto had come out of such a life pure and forgiving, Harry Potter would not. Juubi contemplated the situation several times before it made a decision. It would assist the boy and give him something Naruto never had growing up: knowledge and power. The realms shook as a being of great power descended onto the mortal plane. The oldest of creatures trembled in fear and reverence as Juubi descended down onto Privet Drive. Had anyone looked out their window, they would have seen nothing more than a mass of shadows in the form of a large four-legged creature the size of a horse with 10 overly large tails flailing about behind it. Smiling nostalgically as it watched the boy, Juubi reminisced of its life with Naruto. They had wandered the world merged together for close to 8 centuries before Naruto had died. Then they had spent 2 centuries of life within the underworld just talking and watching the world of the living pass by and evolve. After Naruto's soul had reached its end and rejoined the life stream, Juubi had brooded and mourned his passing for decades before he made his escape from hell in order to watch and protect Naruto's descendants. A task it had failed on this very night when James Potter was struck down by the Dark Lord. Cocking its head to the side, Juubi watched as one of its tails snaked forward and latched onto the boy's chest. "You are fated for greatness, Harry Potter, and I will see that you achieve it," Juubi whispered. "Like your ancestor before you, I will grant you the power to achieve your goals. Be it creation or destruction, you will have the power to walk your path." As he spoke, the tail detached from Juubi's behind and flowed into the small child, and he began to glow with a dark aura. Bit by bit, the aura darkened and solidified until the boy was within a small, black cocoon that pulsed like a beating heart. With a long sigh, the shadowy creature broke apart into dust and faded away as it returned to its own plane. It had gifted the young child with 10% of its power as well as knowledge on countless subjects. Within the cocoon, Harry evolved and changed as he assimilated the demon's power and knowledge. He slept as his skin melted, slept as his muscles tore, slept as his bones were crushed to dust and his organs exploded. Harry continued to sleep as a new body was created, as denser bones were formed, as stronger, more flexible muscles grew, and as near impenetrable skin spread over his body. As the process finished, the cocoon cracked and, like the demon god, turned into dust that faded away moments later. It was at this time that Harry Potter awoke from his slumber. His new form was practically the same as his old, but anyone who had seen him before would notice the difference now. His features seemed sharper and more defined, his facial structure had changed slightly, giving him a noble and regal look, and even at 16 months old he had a lean, muscular frame instead of the baby fat most children would have. Slowly his eyelids opened to reveal lilac-colored sclera with silver concentric circles spreading from the ebony pupils. Within each eye were 5 comma-shaped marks spread evenly on the circled. The commas spun lazily as his eyes flickered before they were replaced with a normal-looking pair of emerald green eyes. The emerald green pupils conveyed youthful innocence and childlike ignorance. But underneath the powerful illusion, 2 cold black pits burned with intelligence and power. Understanding flashed across Harry's face, and with a smirk he slowly closed his eyes and slept once more. All around the world, creatures of the dark and the light gathered. The eldest conveyed what they knew and messages were passed along as whispers. All across the world, seers gasped as a veil covered their inner eyes and the future was hidden from them. For the first time ever, the future of the world was uncertain. Within the bowels of a large building filled with humans racing about in celebration was a dark, circular room. In the center of the room stood a large arch with a thin, transparent veil. Had anyone been within the room, they would have heard as the whispers from within the veil increased in volume before falling quiet as the beings within stopped to watch the world. Deep within a large mountain, humanoid creatures gathered together, their skin pale and flawless, their eyes crimson and their mouths fanged. The vampires convened as the elders awoke from a century-long slumber. One by one the 4 elders awoke, word spread and the vampires rejoiced. Within the northern tower of a large castle, an old man frowned as the flaming bird before him screeched and cowered before disappearing in a burst of flames to parts unknown. He grimaced as the castle shook and the magic ran rampant for a moment. He stood as the call of many creatures rose from the surrounding forest, and he ran from the room as the silver objects meant to monitor a special little boy shook and exploded, spraying sharp pieces of metal around the room. On the doorstep of number 4 Privet Drive, Harry Potter slept while word of his accomplishment spread across the wizarding world. He slept as word of his creation spread among the magical creatures. For the first time in several millennia, a true demon walked the earth. Wednesday, July 31, 1991. Harry James Potter awoke once more to the sound of banging upon his bedroom door. Growling, he got up from his bed and stalked toward the door. Today was his 11th birthday, and he knew he had explicitly ordered the humans to leave him be today. It would seem they needed to learn their place once more. Wrenching the door open, he glared at the frightened form of Vernon Dursley. "What?" he snapped as his emerald eyes glowed dangerously. Vernon shivered as he shakily held out a small brown envelope. "THTH, the LL letter F from H. Hogwarts, sir," he stuttered out. Vernon sighed in relief as Harry's face softened slightly, but his eyes still held that dangerous glint. Grabbing the letter forcefully, Harry nodded and slammed his door closed in the man's face. Vernon turned and quickly made his way down the stairs and far away from the bedroom. Harry smiled as he heard the large man rush away. From day one the Dursleys had hated him. He knew the only reason they kept him around was because the old man Dumbledore had ordered them to that day 11 years ago. Dumbledore had dropped by to check in on him after his instruments had broken. While he had been only 1 year old, Harry still remembered that day clearly, as Dumbledore all but threatened the humans to look after him. At first they had ignored him, only acknowledging his existence when they were forced to feed him. This had suited him fine, as it allowed him to carry on with his business unnoticed. The first 4 years of his rebirth had been spent working on controlling his chakra, or magic as it was now called. Since that day 11 years ago, he knew what he was, he knew where his power and knowledge came from, and he knew how to use it. But he still needed to do the practices to control and master it. At first he was forced to just levitate objects from his position in bed, but as his body grew and he learned to crawl and eventually walk, he began walking across surfaces while levitating heavier and heavier objects to build up his power and control. It was in his 6th year of existence that things with the Dursleys had changed. He had always known they resented him no matter how much he fought for their acknowledgement and acceptance, but that day they had taken him from the room he shared with his cousin and stuffed him into the cupboard underneath the stairs. He had taken that in stride, since it didn't really matter to him, it just provided more privacy. But then came the impossible amount of chores, and even when he finished them all they never thanked him, they just frowned and found more for him to do. It was when they tried to punish him for doing well in school that he snapped. Even as a demon with all the knowledge provided by a god, he still acted like a human. Most of his knowledge came from the juubi's host Uzumaki Naruto and was filled with kind emotions, memories and thoughts. But unlike his ancestor, Harry had a limit to just what he could take. When his uncle had come to beat him for doing well in class, he reached said limit. His demonic heritage made itself known in the form of extreme anger and bloodlust. His eyes glowed, and Vernon and Petunia found themselves trapped within the all-powerful illusion, Tsukuyami, for an hour. They had fallen into a coma for half a day before he calmed down enough to revive them. Since that day his relatives had done everything in their power to avoid him. They had given him his own bedroom to do with as he pleased and left any room whenever he entered. He only saw them when he passed by to get some food or go to school. Smiling happily, Harry tore open the Hogwarts letter and read. He had been waiting for this day for years. Although he had the knowledge from Juubi, he still lacked knowledge on magic and spells used by wizards and witches today. On the subject of magic, Juubi had only focused on rituals, runes and creatures. Rituals and runes in order to make sure it would never be summoned or sealed again, and creatures in order to track the progress and evolution of demon/summon kind. As such, Harry knew everything there was about ritual magics, runes and each of the different magical creatures, but he lacked information on charms, hexes and curses. There was also the fact that his current knowledge was over 1,000 years old due to Juubi's slumber, so he knew nothing of the advances made in the last 1,000 years or so. He was also knowledgeable on jutsu, illusions, seals, healing, weapons, poisons, and had exercised properly to use his own personal close combat fighting style. His knowledge of the ancient arts was unsurpassed by anyone still living, and he had near absolute control over his internal energies, something thought impossible by all wizarding kind. Smiling happily, Harry wrote up a reply and with a flick of his wrist had the letter flying on the wind currents towards Hogwarts. A few hours later, Dumbledore smiled happily as he read the letter for Harry Potter. He had been extremely confused and curious when an envelope had floated through his office window, but those concerns were forgotten when he read who the letter was from. He had been worried that the Dursleys would deny Harry his heritage and leave him ignorant of the magical world, but apparently the boy was informed of his being a wizard and was eager to attend Hogwarts. He frowned though when he read the next paragraph. Harry didn't know how to reach Diagon Alley. He would need someone to pick up and guide Harry around Diagon Alley for his school's shopping. Hagrid was still gone, hunting down his newest pet, while Minerva was retrieving the stone from Nicholas and placing it within Gringotts. The only other he could really trust with this was Severus, and the man absolutely loathed James Potter. Dumbledore sighed as he summoned Snape to his office. Perhaps the man's feelings for Lily would overpower his feelings for James and extend to the boy. Friday, August 2, 1991. Severus Snape scowled as he knocked on the door before him. He had argued against Dumbledore's decision, but in the end the man had sent him on this detestable task. Babysitting a brat, and Potter's brat no less. How undignified. Yes? How can I help you? A voice asked, drawing him out of his thoughts. Snape scowled as he laid eyes on Petunia Dursley, Lily's sister. Petunia's eyes widened as she too recognized him. What are you doing here, Snape? She snapped. Scowling deeply, he narrowed his eyes at the woman. Even after all these years she had not changed. I'm here for Lily's boy. I was sent to escort him to buy his supplies. He drawled out in a bored and annoyed tone. I thought you would be here soon. Greetings, sir. A child's voice sounded from within the building. Turning his head, Snape spotted the boy as he descended down the stairs. He almost gasped as he took in the boy's looks. He had heard from Albus that the boy was supposed to be an exact copy of Potter with Lily's eyes, but that was obviously wrong. Even as a straight man, he would admit the child was beautiful. He had a thin and regal face that seemed to exude radiance and beauty. His skin was pale and flawless, marred only by the small, pink and famous scar on his forehead. His eyes seemed to capture the soul and draw you in while staring right through you at the same time. Had he not known the boy's parents, he would have sworn the child was part Vila. Snape could only stare at what had to be the most perfect-looking child on the planet. Harry smirked as he watched the man staring at him. He knew how others saw him, and how much he captured their attention. It was a demonic trait used to draw in prey by looking beautiful and harmless. Snape's attention was drawn from the boy when he heard Petunia gasp slightly. Turning his attention back to her, he frowned as he took in her state. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking, and she looked ready to faint at any moment as she just stared at Harry in fear. What could frighten her so much about the boy? Before he could say anything, the boy was already standing beside him on the doorstep, and Petunia had slammed the door before rushing away. "Don't mind her, she's just afraid," he heard the boy say. Snape frowned down at him. "Afraid of what?" he asked curiously. Since he had known Petunia, she had been a sour and spiteful creature. Not the fearful woman he had just met. "Of me," was the reply as the both walked away from the house. Snape's frown deepened. "And why would she be afraid of you?" he asked. He studied the boy closely as he spoke. Other than the strange beauty he radiated and the well-kept figure he could see through the boy's clothing, he didn't seem dangerous. His thoughts were cut off as he was suddenly filled with extreme terror and fear. He almost dropped to his knees as he tried to catch his breath. As soon as it had come, the feeling disappeared. In front of him, he noticed the Potter boy was smirking at him. His eyes seemed to flash as he turned and walked away with his hands in his pockets. "Why not?" Harry replied back over his shoulder. After a moment to calm his nerves, Snape followed along. Whatever that strange feeling was, it was definitely Potter's doing. There was more to this boy than he had first thought. First the Vila-like beauty, and now the Dementor-like ability. There was definitely something strange about Harry Potter. Following behind, Snape smirked as he walked. Whatever was different about the boy, at least he didn't act like his bastard father, and that was a bonus in his book. Stopping next to Potter, Snape noted another strange occurrence in his mental list. The boy had stopped and waited for him right on the edge of the anti-operation wards, as if he could sense them. Definitely strange. Grabbing hold of his shoulder, Snape brought them both to the entrance of the leaky cauldron. He also noted that even though it was supposed to be his first time operating, Potter was perfectly fine. Most people would throw up their first time, but the boy didn't look the slightest bit bothered. Leading the way, he led Potter into the leaky cauldron. Snape sighed as yet another wizard came up to shake the boy's hand and greet him. They had been in here for 10 minutes, and the people just wanted to revere the boy. As he noticed Diggory go up to shake Potter's hand for the 4th time, Snape reached into the crowd and grabbed the boy. "Come along, Mr. Potter, we still need to do your shopping," he stated, dragging the boy from the bar and through the magic wall that served as an entrance to Diagon Alley. "Ah, thanks for that, sir. I was getting annoyed at all the people wanting to meet me," Harry stated. "Don't mention it," Snape replied in his bored tone. "I'm sure now you'll want to know why everyone seems to worship the ground you walk on," he continued. He had already been informed by Dumbledore that he would need to explain to Potter about his fame, since the letter left with Petunia made no mention of the Dark Lord. "Isn't it because I supposedly killed that Dark Lord when I was a year old?" Harry asked in a nonchalant manner. Snape's eyes widened comically for a moment before he schooled his features. "How did you find out about that?" he asked in a hushed tone. Harry simply smirked in response. "That's for me to know, and you to never find out," he replied, walking away once more. Snape could only stare at his back in surprise at yet another strange occurrence. Sighing once more, he followed Harry into Diagon Alley. Chapter 2, Summer. Friday, August 2nd, 1991. Harry smirked as he strolled through Diagon Alley. It took all his willpower to keep his eyes peeled forward while he wanted to run from store to store exploring the wonders of the magical world. 10 years of being cooped up in Surrey made this experience all the more exciting. Up ahead he could see their first stop, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Snape frowned as he followed behind Potter. The boy was proving to be less like his father as the day wore on. James Potter had been a show-off and an attention-seeker who would always do his best to attract attention. But Harry Potter was the opposite. He easily attracted attention without even trying, yet simply ignored it. As they walked through the alley, people had begun to stop and simply stare as they went by. He knew it wasn't because they recognized the boy who lived, since the scar was currently covered up. No, from the looks of resentment the men threw at him, and the blushing faces of the women they passed, he knew what attracted them was the boy's charm and beauty. He had seen scenes like this many times, but those had been in France and always involved one of the Vila. For a human to draw such attention such as this was unheard of, and he knew Potter had no Vila blood within him. He sneered as he saw one of the younger witches swoon and faint when the boy directed a smile her way. Given a few more years, the boy would be a real lady killer. Entering the bank, Harry walked past the various witches and wizards that had stopped to gawk, and made his way to one of the tellers. From the way the goblin's eyes widened and how other goblins began to whisper and point at him, he knew they recognized him. Not as the bloody boy who lived, but as a greater demon. Watch what you say, goblin. It would not be pleasant for you and your kin if the humans discover what I am because of loose lips. He threatened quietly in gobbledygook. The goblin nodded shakily to show its understanding. Snape, having overheard but not understood, frowned. Where did Potter learn the goblin language? Only a handful of wizards knew it, and most of them worked within the Goblin Liaison Department at the Ministry and had no choice but to learn it. He added this new fact to his mental list as he handed the goblin Potter's key. "Hello, Professor Snape, fancy seeing you here." A deep voice boomed behind them. Both turned to regard the enormous form of Rebus Hagrid. "Good afternoon, Hagrid," Snape drawled out in an exasperated tone. Hagrid smiled as he spotted Harry's small form beside the older wizard. "Ah, Harry. Good to see ya. Last time I saw you were an itty-bitty baby." Hagrid said, "My name's Hagrid, groundskeeper of Hogwarts," he added, crouching down to speak with him. Harry cracked his heart-warming smile at the half-giant. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Mr. Hagrid, sir," he replied, shaking the man's large hand. I'll be having none of that sir stuff. I was a friend of your parents, just call me Hagrid," Hagrid stated happily. Snape chose to cut in at that moment. "What are you doing here, Hagrid?" he asked with the same bored and mocking tone. "Picking up a package for Dumbledore," Hagrid replied, handing a key to the goblin. Harry hummed as he followed behind a small fidgety goblin that would send him the occasional glance. As they boarded a cart with Hagrid, much to Snape's displeasure, he decided to speak with the goblin. "So what's your name?" he asked. "Griphook, Lord Potter, sir," the goblin stuttered back. "It's nice to meet you, Griphook. You can just call me Harry," he replied. Snape frowned once more as he studied the small interaction. The goblin had been acting strange since they had met him, but after the small talk with Potter he seemed to relax. He had even sighed in relief when Potter had smiled at him, as if he had expected the boy to attack him and was relieved to escape with his life. Another thing he noticed was the silence as the cart rolled through the caverns. Every time he had come here there had always been the roars of dragons resounding throughout the cavern, but this time there was absolute silence. After a few minutes they arrived at Vault 687. "This is your vault, Mr. Potter. Unfortunately you cannot access the Potter family vault until you come of age, but this trust fund should be enough until you are declared an adult," Griphook explained as he opened the vault. Snape gagged as he stared wide-eyed at the various piles of gold and silver within the vault. There was more money here than in his personal vault and the Prince family vault combined, and this was only the boy's trust fund. "Is there any way to know how much I have in here?" Harry asked, sparing the vault only a single glance. "Yes, sir, there's a self-updating bank statement next to the door there," Griphook replied, pointing at a piece of parchment attached to the wall. "That's only a copy, so you can take it with you," he added as Harry perused the form. "Thanks," Harry replied, grabbing one of the money bags on the wall and filling it with several handfuls of gold coins. The bag was magically expanded so it didn't even grow in size as the gold was poured in. Closing and tying the bag, Harry stuffed it into his pocket, and they left the vault behind. Descending to Vault 713, Harry moved aside as Hagrid shuffled out of the cart and into the vault. He noted that the vault was strangely empty except for a small paper-wrapped package in the center which Hagrid stuffed into his pocket. "He sent you to come grab it? What is that old fool thinking?" Snape hissed at Hagrid as he re-entered the cart. Hagrid threw him a glare but remained silent. Snape continued to glare at the half-giant as they rode the cart back to the bank lobby. "Right then, I'll be seeing you at Hogwarts, Harry," Hagrid stated, patting him on the back. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Hagrid," Harry replied with his trademark heart-warming smile. Nodding to him, Hagrid turned and lumbered off. "Come along, Potter, we don't have all day," Snape drawled. "You are permitted to enter any store you choose. It is only my duty to advise you on what you buy so you don't waste your money or forget anything." Harry led him back to the alley's entrance. From there they could walk past the stores one by one and loop around. Entering the apothecary, Harry was informed by Snape that the older man was the potions professor at Hogwarts. With the man's help and advice he bought a large shelved closet and filled it with several different ingredients. The closet was enchanted to shrink when tapped with a wand and also extended the lifetime of materials stored within it. He bought a year's supply of ingredients with over 10 years until they expired inside the closet. Shrinking the closet down until it was the size of a card deck, he placed it into a magically expanded shopping bag and followed Snape out the door. Rather than continue with his original plan, Snape dragged him across the street to the cauldron shop where Harry purchased a brass, iron, gold, and silver cauldron as well as a set of scales and 2 pairs of knives that magically cut ingredients for the user. He also got a pair of magical ladles that would follow any instructions given and stir the potions perfectly. Snape placed the other objects within the cauldrons, then shrunk the 4 cauldrons for him, and placed them in the shopping bag. Exiting the store, Harry crossed the road, once more ignoring the looks sent his way by passerbys, and walked past the apothecary as well as quality Quidditch supplies where several children were gawking at the newest broom, a Nimbus 2000. Entering a small stationery shop, he purchased 3 packs of parchment in white, yellow, and black, 4 bottles of ink in black, blue, gold, and silver. He then bought a lovely but expensive griffin quill as well as several hippogriff quills. Lastly, he purchased an acid green, peacock feather quick quotes quill, which was a quill that was magically enchanted to write down whatever was said in order to speed up note-taking time. Afterwards, Snape guided him around Flourish and Blots to purchase his school books. While there, Harry also picked up a book on advanced charms, potions, and spells as well as a book on aura fighting styles and spells. After a suggestion from Snape, he picked up a copy of Hogwarts, a history for research. Snape tapped his foot impatiently as Harry picked up a couple books on ministry laws and regulations, instead of placing them with his other books, though the boy simply flipped through them and replaced them on the shelf. After a few minutes of this, they paid and left the store. Next, they came to Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Entering the store, Harry spotted a young blonde boy already being measured. The boy's eyes widened as they entered, and he smiled. "Hello, Uncle Sev," the boy greeted. "What are you doing here?" Snape gave the boy a small smile. "Hello, Draco. I'm currently working. Dumbledore has me escorting Mr. Potter here around while he shops. Harry, this is my godson Draco Malfoy." "Draco, Harry Potter," he replied. Harry gave the other boy a nod, but the boy and the woman measuring him could only stare, caught up by both his fame and overbearing charm. "Bless my soul, Harry Potter," the woman said at the same time. Draco exclaimed, "Blimey, you're Harry Potter." "Manners, Draco. Mr. Potter does not appreciate being gawked at like an animal," Snape drawled. Harry could still hear some amusement in his tone. He smiled at the two before him. Draco and the woman blushed in reply, one in embarrassment and the other from his heart-fluttering smile. Taking a stand on the pedestal next to Draco, the blonde boy engaged him in some light conversation as they were both measured. "My father's next door buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at wands," Draco drawled. Although he was talking to Harry, the comment was also directed at Snape, who nodded at the boys before exiting the store. "After this, I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow. Have you got your own broom?" Draco continued. "Not yet, no point since I can't take it with me," Harry replied. "Ah, okay. Do you play Quidditch as well?" Draco asked after a moment. "No, I've been raised by my Muggle relatives, so I don't know much about the wizarding world," Harry answered nonchalantly. Draco gave him an apologetic look. "That's a shame. It must be horrible living with Muggles," he stated. "Not really, they're afraid of magic, so they try to avoid me as much as possible," Harry replied. Draco nodded and gave him a small smile. "Know what house you'll be in yet?" he asked, changing the subject. "Not yet," Harry replied. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I hope I'll be in Slytherin. All my family have been, also Uncle Snape's the head of house," Draco boasted. "Oh? Well, in that case I hope I get sent to Slytherin as well," Harry commented. Draco spent the next few minutes telling him all about the houses and what they stood for. Although Madame Malkin cut in a few times to straighten some points out and give an unbiased overview of the 4 houses, Harry couldn't help but agree that Slytherin seemed to be the best house for him. Gryffindors were all about courage and brashness, something he was not. Ravenclaws were studious and knowledgeable, and while he liked to learn, he would prefer to do other more exciting things instead. Hufflepuffs, even though they were looked down on, were loyal and friendly. To him they sounded like followers, and if there was one thing Harry Potter refused to be, it was a follower. Slytherins, on the other hand, were smart and cunning. They looked out for themselves first and others second, and even though they were regarded as evil, that was only because most Slytherins were dark wizards. To him, Slytherin sounded like a perfect place to belong. They were like the ninjas of old, cunning and ruthless, only with less skill. Draco's head turned as his attention was drawn by something outside the window. "I say, look at that man!" he shouted, nodding towards the front window. Harry turned and spotted who he was talking about. Lumbering past the store towards the leaky cauldron was Hagrid. "Oh, that's Hagrid, he works at Hogwarts," Harry supplied. "Oh," Draco said, "I've heard of him. He's a servant of some kind, isn't he?" He's a groundskeeper, Harry replied. Yes, exactly. The headmaster at Hogwarts took him on after he got expelled. Now he lives in a hut on the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed, Draco stated. I don't know about that, but he seems quite nice. I met him at the bank earlier, Harry responded. Before Draco could reply, Madame Malkin announced that his robes were finished. Jumping down from the pedestal, Draco extended a hand to Harry. It was nice meeting you, Potter friends, he asked. Smiling back at the boy, Harry shook his hand. Sure thing, he replied. As Draco collected his robes and paid the seamstress, Snape re-entered the store, followed by a tall blonde man who looked similar to Draco. Oh, father! Draco exclaimed excitedly. This is my new friend Harry Potter. Harry, this is my father Lucius Malfoy, Draco said, introducing the two. Harry shook the older man's hand. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Malfoy, he said politely. And I you, Mr. Potter? Lucius replied with a nod. Severus was just telling me about you. How have you found the wizarding world in comparison to the Muggle world? He asked. Oh, it's quite wonderful, Harry replied. Living with Muggles is so boring. I'm just glad I was accepted to Hogwarts, he added. At this time, Madame Malkin also finished up with his robes. Buying 7 pairs of plain black school robes, Harry also purchased 7 black dress shirts, 7 pairs of black pants, 2 dark green inner robes, and a black outer robe with a silver trim. The last robe was a dress robe used for dances and formal gatherings. He also bought a pair of black dragon skin boots as well as a pair of green dragon skin boots. Lastly, he purchased a pack of black socks and 3 ties, all with the same design. They had large black stripes bordered with slightly thinner green stripes, and the green stripes were then bordered with silver threading. Moving to the on-shelf section, Harry picked out several sets of casual clothing that could be worn in both the Muggle and magical worlds. Most of the clothes were in black and silver or multiple shades of green. Snape and Lucius smirked and nodded to his selection of Slytherin colors, but frowned when Harry also purchased a crimson dress robe with gold trimming, obvious Gryffindor colors. Paying the seamstress, Harry placed all his purchases within the enchanted bag and followed Snape out the store. He said his goodbyes to Draco and Lucius as the two headed to Ollivanders, while Harry and Snape entered the magical menagerie. The store was very cramped and stuffy, filled with various animals. Ignoring the snakes' hissing complaints from their cage, Harry followed behind Snape. According to the school rules, students were only allowed a toad, owl, or cat while at Hogwarts. After spending time viewing each creature, Harry crossed off the toads from his list. He had expected some to be magical descendants of his ancestors' summons, but all the store contained were normal variety toads. An owl was also crossed off, since he had his own way of delivering letters that was faster, and pet owls tend to stick out with Muggles. In the end, he chose a black and silver striped half-Kneazle. The cat had taken a liking to him, and Harry decided to name it Yugito since it was female. Snape had looked at him strangely due to the strange name, but had kept silent as Harry purchased a cage, some food and toys for his new pet. After that, he stopped in at a luggage store to purchase a trunk. The trunk was magically expanded to hold up to 10 times its regular limit. Unlike the other trunks though, this one came with a small school bag that was connected to the trunk. Anything stored in the trunk could be withdrawn through the bag by sticking your hand in and thinking of what you want. Getting the trunk shrunk by a clerk, Harry stored it within his shopping bag and followed behind Snape as they left the store. Walking past the joke shop and the second-hand robes store, Harry entered Ollivander's wand shop. He noticed that Draco had already left, and only he, Snape, and a pudgy old man were within the shop. As the old man walked over to speak to them, Harry smirked. Underneath the illusion, his eyes spun, and a moment later Snape and Ollivander froze as their eyes glazed over. Casting a minor illusion over the store so he wouldn't be interrupted, Harry slipped behind the counter and into the workshop behind the store. Behind the counter was a room filled with many strange objects. There were several different logs of wood laying about. On a table to the side was a small pile of glowing feathers. Beside them was what had to be the biggest heart he had ever seen. It was at least twice the size of his head and seemed to still beat with a steady rhythm. Taking a step into the room, Harry gagged as a feeling of utter revulsion filled him. He nearly dropped to his knees and emptied his stomach, but with a few deep breaths was able to calm himself. Spreading out his senses, he located the source of the feeling. The pile of glowing feathers were actually phoenix feathers, and next to the door, hidden from his line of sight until he entered the room, was a large pile of unicorn hairs. Materials from 2 of the purest light creatures were in such close proximity that it was a wonder he didn't pass out. Being a pure demon, a creature of the dark, he shared the revulsion for all light creatures that dark creatures held, and being so close to the large amounts of hair and feathers had caused a negative reaction. Calming himself, he focused on the tables the 2 piles rested on. Slowly but surely the wood bent and warped until the 2 piles were encased in a small wooden ball, lessening the effect they had on him. Straightening up, he began to look around the room searching for the correct items. He found his goal in the form of a bookcase at the back of the room hidden behind a tapestry. Searching quickly, he pulled out 5 tomes. Each was bound in red with a black number on the front, numbering from 1 to 5. Above each number was the book's title: A Warlock's Guide to Wand Crafting. Harry smirked as he viewed the collection. He had flipped through a book of ministry laws at Flourish and Blots earlier, and while Snape thought he had just skimmed through and put them back in boredom, Harry had actually been memorizing the books one by one with his Sharingan abilities. It was through these books that he had learned about not only the laws on underage magic and the trace on an underage witch or wizard's wand, but also the ban on wand crafting by non-licensed individuals. It was also through this knowledge that he had guessed correctly that Ollivander would have books on said subject. Opening the first book, Harry slowly flipped through the pages, taking the time to memorize and burn all the information into his mind. After 5 minutes he had finished viewing all the books, and after placing them back on the shelf he looked through the rest of Ollivander books for any items of interest. He chose to memorize book on magical enhancers, another on materials best used for wand crafting, and Ollivander's personal notes on matching a wand with its user. Once finished, he hid all hints of his actions and quickly fled from the room before the feathers and hairs could affect him. Slipping back into the main section of the store, he walked over just as Ollivander was finished finding a wand suitable for his illusionary self. Harry heard something about great things blah blah blah, powerful wand blah blah blah, brother wands blah blah blah, scar on head. Taking his position in front of the man, he reached out and grabbed hold of the wand Ollivander offered. The feeling of revulsion entered him once more, and it took nearly all his willpower to not destroy the wand in his hand. The wand contained a phoenix feather at its core, and although the effect was less than that of the feather pile in the back, it still affected him to a degree. He would never truly bond with this wand, and using it would limit his abilities. With a snap of his fingers the illusion was dispelled, and the glazed look on both men's eyes cleared, and they continued on as if nothing had changed. "That will be 7 galleons, Mr. Potter," Ollivander stated. Handing over the money, Harry followed behind Snape as they left. The potion's master was acting strangely, but he was sure it had more to do with what Ollivander had said about his wand than anything else. After all, no one in this day and age was powerful or experienced enough to sense a genjutsu. Crossing the road, Harry walked past the junk store as they made their way back to the leaky cauldron. He felt a tight grip on his shoulder as he tried to turn down a darkened road. His first instinct was to remove the offending hand from his body, but he was able to calm himself before he could react. Turning, he followed the arm up to a stern-looking Snape who was shooting a disdainful look down the alleyway. "I would suggest you avoid Nocturne Alley, Mr. Potter. It is not a place for respectable wizards to venture into. There are many dark and forbidden items for sale within the alley," Snape explained, glaring down into the darkened alleyway. Nodding to the older man, Harry shot one last look at Nocturne Alley before continuing on his way. Passing by an ice cream store and a candy shop, Harry made a stop inside a magical instruments shop. "Welcome, what can I help you with, sir?" the attendant asked from behind the counter of the small store. Harry noted that the walls were covered with different clocks, each with a different function but none of which told the time. Within the glass counter were various watches, 2 boxes of rings as well, and several necklaces and pins. A large cabinet to the right of the door held various weapons and holsters, while another held different items of dress, like sunglasses and earrings. "Hello, I'm just looking," Harry replied as he walked up to the counter. Spotting an item of interest, he asked, "Can you tell me what this watch here does?" he asked, pointing at a round silver watch with a black and green leather strap. It had mostly caught his eye since it was in Slytherin colors. "Ah yes, that's one of the newer models. It has 4 functions, each activated by one of these buttons," the attendant explained, holding up the watch and showing off the buttons, 2 on each side. "The first function tells you the time at either your current position or anywhere else in the world. Simply hold the button and say the location, and it will tell you the time in that area." He then pushed the button, and Harry watched as the watch face blinked over and the current time appeared in red on the surface. "The second function is like a tracker. Simply point the watch at what you want to track and push the button. The watch will then magically send you signals allowing you to track down whatever you cast it on." Harry nodded along and pretended to be fascinated with that. The watch was low on magical power, meaning it would most likely have a limited range. It was far simpler for him to use his senses when tracking someone. The clerk continued on to the third function without pause. The third function allows you to program a low-power spell into the watch. It currently holds the Lumos spell, but there is a list of spells you can program into the watch, allowing you to use your wand with one hand and another spell with the other. Harry perked up at this. Although the spells would be low-level, the fact he could program spells into an object was interesting. He had been trying to do that with his seals, but each time the seal would either overload or short-circuit, the watch would most likely give him the breakthrough he needed. How were all these functions added to the watch? He cut in as the clerk was moving on to the 4th function. The watch was enchanted. Enchantment is a demanding but rewarding branch of magic that you will have the option of taking in your 7th year. Snape explained from his spot behind Harry. Harry simply nodded in reply as he filed the information away. He would definitely have to look in on enchantments. The clerk took the silence as his cue to continue and began on the watch's 4th function. The 4th button is like a day planner. Just hold it, say the date and time of your appointment, and it will sound a chime an hour in advance to remind you. He finished explaining. Nodding, Harry placed the watch on the counter. He also placed a pair of rings that served as short-range radios. Enchanted glasses that protected the eyes from potion fumes, blinding spells as well as dust and debris. A necklace with a large blue sapphire that was enchanted to increase the wearer's luck as well as protect from danger by use of a medium power shield spell. A wand holster that could go around the waist or the wrist and was enchanted to prevent the wand within from being summoned. Lastly, he picked out a matching pair of 12-inch long daggers enchanted to never dull, never stain as well as cause wounds that couldn't be healed with magic. Harry found it strange that Snape, a professor at the school he was to attend, said nothing about the obviously dangerous items he was purchasing. The man simply looked on with his constant scowl as Harry paid for the items and exited the store. Ignoring the now constant gawkers, Harry made his way past the last few stores and eventually they arrived back at the Leaky Cauldron, where Snape suggested they get some lunch while he explained a few things. Inside the bar they had a run-in with a tall fidgety man by the name of Quirrell, who Snape seemed to detest but Harry found interesting. He learned that Quirrell was also one of the professors at Hogwarts, and would be teaching him defense against the dark arts. After shaking the man's hand for close to 5 minutes they managed to get a table and order lunch. Now, Mr. Potter, it is my duty to inform you that you are not permitted to use magic in front of muggles or while out of school until you come of age, Snape stated. Harry simply nodded. From his earlier reading he already knew that the law would only come into effect once he set foot in Hogwarts. Until then he could practice as much magic as he wanted. Reaching into his robe, Snape pulled out a small slip of paper. This is your ticket for the Hogwarts Express. The train leaves on the last day of August from King's Cross Station, he explained, handing over the slip. As you can see, you leave from platform 9 3/4, which is magically hidden from muggles. To reach it you must walk through the pillar between platforms 9 and 10. Harry nodded in understanding as he tucked the ticket into his pocket as their food arrived. Thanking the waitress they both dug into their food while Harry asked the professor a few questions about the school. Once the meal was finished, Snape once more put a hand on his shoulder and brought them both back to Privet Drive. They arrived just outside the wards and Snape peered down at his young charge. Enjoy your summer, Mr. Potter. I will see you at Hogwarts, he stated. Thank you for your assistance, Professor. I look forward to the coming school year, Harry replied, giving his heart-warming smile. Nodding stiffly, Snape smirked slightly as he walked away. Turning, Harry hummed slightly as he headed back to number 4 Privet Drive. The day had gone well. He now knew where to pick up magical supplies and had some new books to keep him entertained for the summer. He frowned as he remembered his first order of business, getting a new wand. Although he had mastered countless jutsu that would make most spells seem like child's play, he would need a wand to keep his cover as a regular wizard. He already had an idea of what he would need to get the wand, but it would take a few tries to correctly create the wand. Even with the knowledge from Ollivander, he still needed practice to use it effectively. Sunday, August 11, 1991. Harry cursed as yet another wand blew up in his face, sending splinters flying around the room. He grumbled to himself as the magically enhanced shards of wood were slowly pushed out of his skin and the wound sealed shut with a hiss. Having nigh impenetrable skin, he had been caught completely off guard when the first wand exploded and managed to harm him. Since then he had gotten used to having to heal himself every time one of these wands detonated. It had been over a week since his trip to Diagon Alley, and since that time he had been trying to make a new wand tailored for him. He had dropped by a nearby lumber mill and borrowed several different logs of wood to use. Unfortunately, the ritual used to find his compatible materials always ended the same way, splinters of wood in the face. Other than the rare or magical breeds of wood, he had already tried every type of wood available. Hell, he had even grown his own tree using his Mokotan powers alone, and that had ended the same. Damn it, do I have to go see Ollivander again? Maybe he has some rarer types of wood I can use. Harry pondered angrily. With a wave of his hand, the bits of wood collected together into a pile, and then seemed to fuse together until a small log was left in their place. Slumping down onto the floor, Harry mentally reviewed what he had learned from Ollivander's books. He had already used the core-seeking spell and had found himself well suited for Thestral heartstrings. Thestrals were creatures of death and were one of the closest magical creatures to demonikind. A wand made with their heartstrings as a core would suit him far better than the phoenix feather wand that Twit Ollivander had given him. He absolutely abhorred that wand. Every time he touched it he felt like insects were crawling all over his body. It was revolting. Now if only he could find a proper material to encase the core with. None of the common materials were working, and the only option left was a crystal wand or a bone wand. Unfortunately, the only crystals he could get his hands on were within his vault, and none of those had worked well. The diamond had shown some compatibility, but was not powerful enough to be used as a casing, perhaps as a focus and enhancer, but not as a casing. As for bones, he had used dragon, giant, and even troll, but none had worked. Perhaps he would need to make another trip into Nocturne Alley for some rarer materials. As he thought, Harry carted his hands through his hair and sighed. It was as he was doing this that his mind landed on a footnote in Ollivander's personal notes. According to the wandmaker, using a part of the wielder in the crafting process would make the wand far more compatible. Harry had assumed this meant a hair, or some blood, and was prepared for that, but as he stared at his arm he had a sudden thought. Could it work? After all, he was a magical creature, the purest in the last 2 centuries. Staring blankly at his right arm, Harry waved his other hand, and a blade of wind formed at the tip of his fingers. Raising the hand up, he poised it to strike. As the blade fell, he had one thought. What I wouldn't give to be a Kagaya right now. Harry almost whooped with joy in his excitement. The ritual had worked. He now had his casing. Reaching into the bubble of magic floating above the blood-soaked floor, Harry grasped hold of the item floating within. The bubble dissipated as he withdrew the item. Held in his hand was a 10-inch long, pristine white, hollow rod. It was exactly the same as any other wand casing in the world, except for one simple fact: this was made of demon bone, his bone. Harry flinched slightly as he felt phantom pains run through his arm. It had taken close to an hour to regenerate the bones in his forearm, and the process had been quite painful, but he now had his casing. All he would need was the core and to perform the creation ritual. Looking outside his window, he noticed that time had passed quickly. The sun had already set, and it was the perfect time to go about his business once more. Making sure his door was locked, he grabbed a large black robe from his closet and slipped it on. Pulling the hood up over his head, he made sure his face was completely hidden within the shadows of the robe before tucking his phoenix wand into a pocket. Making sure he had his money bag in his pocket, Harry concentrated on his destination. A moment later, the air around him seemed to twist and bend as his body was sucked into a vortex originating from his right eye. Without a sound, Harry twisted out of the vortex and landed softly in an alleyway beside Gringotts. Like he had many times the last week, he looked around the alleyway before dropping the illusion hiding his form. Pulling his hood back into place, he made his way out of the alley. It was dark in Diagon Alley, and the shoppers had dwindled down to just a few people heading to the bars. The various shops were closing or already closed, so not many noticed the small black form slip into Nocturne Alley. While Diagon Alley was closing down and almost deserted, the stores within Nocturne Alley were still open and looked like they would be for hours still. Ignoring the old woman attempting to sell him human fingers, Harry made his way down the alley. Passing by a shady-looking pet store, a tattoo parlor, a small pub, and a second-hand junk shop, he made his way towards a store he had seen many times but never entered: Borgin and Burke's. According to the rumors he had heard in Diagon Alley, Borgin and Burke sold a variety of artifacts and dark items, exactly what he sought. Stepping into the store, he frowned as a small bell above the door rang. Looking around, Harry noted that there was no one else inside the establishment, but he could hear sounds coming from a room behind the counter. Closing the door behind him, he strolled through the store, looking at the various items upon the shelf but making sure not to touch any. Never knew what could happen. "You lost, boy?" a voice asked. Turning, Harry spotted a tall, dark-haired man watching him from the counter. "No, I'm exactly where I want to be," he said, walking towards the counter. "Oh?" the man asked with a raised brow and a skeptical look on his face. "And what is it you're looking to buy?" "I require some thestral heartstrings, the older the better," Harry replied with a low tone. The clerk's eyebrows rose even higher before his look of skepticism turned to one of suspicion. "And what would a child like you need such items for?" he asked. "Thestral parts are rare to come by. It will cost you a pretty penny," he added, pulling out a black case from a shelf to the side. Pulling out a bag of galleons, Harry spilled the gold coins onto the countertop. "Money is not an issue," he replied. The clerk's eyes sparkled as he looked at the pile of gold. His suspicious look turned into one of greed as he opened the black case. Within the case were several small vials, each with a different-looking material inside. Reaching into the case, the man pulled out 5 vials, 3 of which had a mass of red flesh within, and the last 2 had some black dried mass. "The red ones are only a few years old and they cost 107 galleons apiece. The black ones are far older and are 234 galleons apiece," the clerk explained. Harry nodded and divided up the gold. He bought the 2 black vials in case one failed. Thestrals, like most magical beings, became more powerful as they aged. As such, the older the heartstring he used, the more powerful his wand would be. Slipping the 2 vials into his pocket, Harry packed the rest of the gold into his pouch. "Will you be needing anything else, sir?" the clerk asked. I'm starting school soon, what would you suggest? Harry asked calmly. The clerk seemed to think for a bit before snapping his fingers and heading into the back room. He came out moments later carrying a small stack of books. I take it you're going to Hogwarts? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, considering who the headmaster is, you won't have a chance to learn any of the so-called dark arts. These are some books on basic and advanced curses. There's a whole set here so you can learn them as you grow. I even included one on legilimency, the clerk declared, setting the books on the counter. Harry counted a set of 8 on curses and dark spells, 1 book on unforgivable curses from around the world, as well as a book on mind arts. The clerk stopped him as he went for his money pouch. I have a few terms before you can buy these, he said. Harry frowned. What terms? He asked. Well, first off, you have to understand that this stuff takes a while to learn, so don't go blaming me if you can't do it on your first try, the clerk stated. Harry nodded in acceptance. That was understandable. Secondly, you must swear an oath to tell no one what you bought here. These books are illegal, and I'm only offering since you have the cash. If you won't swear the oath, then I won't sell them to you, the clerk stated darkly. Harry could see him fingering his wand, and he was sure his memory would be erased if he refused to swear the oath. He growled slightly. Unlike wizards, he was a demon. His oath carried far more weight than theirs, and as such he tried to never give his word. Taking a moment to review the man's request, he couldn't really find any way this could come back around to harm him, so he decided he would give his oath this once. Of course, an illusion would easily fool the human before him, but there wasn't much of a point for a small issue like this. I swear on my blood and magic to never reveal what I have purchased this day, he said loudly. The air crackled with power as the oath was made. So mote it be, the clerk added with a tone of finality. There was a loud snap as the oath was accepted and their magic bound to it. Smiling at him, the clerk pushed the books forward. That will be 456 galleons for all 10 books, he stated. Harry quickly handed the money over and collected the books. The clerk watched as Harry pulled out a piece of parchment and seemed to doodle on it. His eyes widened comically as the books were then placed on top of the parchment and disappeared with a puff of smoke. He wisely chose to say nothing as Harry rolled up the parchments and with a nod exited the store. Tuesday, August 13, 1991. Harry sighed as he finished drawing the last rune. He was currently in the top floor of an old abandoned building just a few miles from his home. The wards surrounding Number 4 Privet Drive were weak and easy to circumvent from time to time, but even they would sense the amount of magical power he was about to release. Drawn on the ground with black charcoal was a star within an inverted triangle within a triangle within a square within a circle. The entire diagram was made up of various runes with multiple functions. In the center of the diagram lay 3 objects: the pristine white bone casing, the pitch-black heartstring, and a small clear diamond. Standing up, he surveyed his handiwork and nodded in appreciation. The rune diagram was perfect, and everything was prepared. Drawing on his power, he began to pour it into the diagram while whispering the words for the spell. The runes glowed a bright red as a tornado of pure energy surrounded the 3 objects. The energy raised them up into the air and began to twist and bend around until the objects were stored within a dark red bubble similar to the one used in the identifying ritual. Harry continued to whisper the ritual words for a few more minutes until the red bubble turned pitch black and then clear to reveal a single object within. The glow from the runes lessened and then disappeared, leaving the ground underneath clear of any evidence. Harry took a step closer and with no hesitation reached into the bubble and grasped his wand. He gasped as pure power shot through his body from the wand. The object bonded to his core within a moment, and he felt his power grow exponentially. This wand was far more powerful than his other, and as he held it in his hand he felt like he could do anything at all. He felt invincible. Unlike most wands that were created to focus a witch or wizard's power, this one served a different function. Harry had near-perfect control over his magic, so a focusing item was unneeded. The runes he had used for this ritual served to create an amplifier instead of a focus. The wand would boost his power rather than focus it like other wands would. After a few minutes he calmed down from his power high and withdrew his new wand from the magical bubble. Rather than the white bone he had expected, the wand was now a pitch black and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was 9 inches long, completely smooth, and topping the wand was a clear 3-inch long diamond tip with a long strand that trailed down the wand slightly. Picture link on my profile page. Holding it tightly, he pointed it towards a wall and decided to test the wand. He made a quick slashing motion with the wand as he whispered a spell. Diffindo. He felt as a sliver of his power flowed into the wand and out the tip. The diamond tip of his wand glowed a light green as the cutting charm as fired towards the wall. Harry gaped as he observed the aftereffects of his spell. The last time he had practiced the cutting charm with his other wand, it had left a 5-inch long cut on the wall that was only a few centimeters deep. This time, however, his spell had cleaved a meter-long gash into the wall, and although he couldn't see how deep it was, he could definitely hear air flowing in through the cut. Harry looked down at the wand, wide eyes before grinning widely. Thursday, August 29, 1991. Harry hummed to himself as he flipped another page in his book. He would be leaving for Hogwarts in 2 days and had decided to pass the time reading and learning. He had already memorized all of his first-year textbooks, the first 3 of the dark arts books from Nocturne, as well as the books on advanced charms and mind arts. He was currently reviewing the book on mind arts in order to further his legitimacy. Harry had discovered weeks ago that as a demon he had natural mental barriers. As such, he would never need to worry about having his mind invaded. On the other hand, he needed twice as much practice to master invading another's mind. Well, without use of his dojutsu, that is something his relatives had been most helpful with. Speaking of which. "Oh, Dudders, could you give me a hand with something?" he asked his large cousin as the boy walked past his door. Dudley froze in step as his eyes widened in fear. Harry smirked. The large boy was most likely remembering the last time he had given him a hand. Dudley had spent hours on the floor gripping his head in pain as Harry forcefully invaded his mind and practiced his legitimacy. As if sensing his cousin's thoughts, Dudley turned and made a dead run for his room, or at least he attempted to. The second Dudley began running, Harry was already leaning out the door with his wand trained on the boy's back. Petrificus Totalis, the full body bind, caught him in the back mid-step, causing him to fall forward and land flat on his face. A wave of his wand and Harry had his cousin floating towards him. The larger boy was levitated into the room and dropped on the floor as the door shut behind him. A moment later, Dudley could move again, but he chose to cower on the floor. Grinning down at his cousin, Harry aimed his wand at him. "Relax, this won't hurt a bit." "Well, I think it won't. I haven't really had a chance to practice with it, you see," he stated nonchalantly. Dudley whimpered. Obliviate. Saturday, August 31, 1991. Stepping out onto the platform, Harry sighed in relief as the illusion surrounding him dropped. It was near impossible for him to walk anywhere without attracting attention, yet alone through a pillar in a busy train station. Muggles were less resistant to his allure, and would have followed his every move had he not set up an illusion beforehand. Head held high, Harry calmly made his way towards the large red train engine. He pointedly ignored the looks he garnered from the crowd as he walked by. Several women actually swooned when they caught his eye. How embarrassing. For them at least, he found it amusing. He spotted Draco and his father standing next to a beautiful and equally blonde woman, most likely his friend's mother. Passing by a group of blushing, giggling teens, Harry made his way over to the Malfoy family. "Harry, good to see you again," Draco exclaimed, seeing his friend come close. His father and mother both turned to see him at Draco's exclamation. "Hello, Draco, Mr. Malfoy," Harry greeted politely. He got a smile from the younger boy and a nod from the older Malfoy. "And you must be Draco's mother?" he asked the woman. "Narcissa Malfoy. It's nice to finally meet Draco's new friend," she said, holding out a hand. "Harry Potter at your service, ma'am," Harry replied, taking the hand and kissing her knuckles lightly. "And I must say you are far more beautiful than I was led to believe," he added. Narcissa blushed slightly at the compliment. "You're very polite for one so young, Mr. Potter," she replied. "It's easy to sound polite when you're being truthful," Harry answered back with a smile. Narcissa's blush deepened. "And a smooth talker as well. You should be careful, Lucius. This young man might just steal me away." Lucius chuckled. "Well, dear, he certainly knows what he's doing," he replied. "Why don't you help your friend onto the train, Draco, before he steals your mother away?" Lucius added with a grin. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Malfoy. I look forward to seeing the two of you again," Harry said with a wave. Following behind Draco, he boarded the train and looked for a compartment. "Where's your trunk?" Draco asked, noticing that Harry was only carrying a small cage with his cat inside. "I had it shrunk at the store. It's in my pocket," Harry lied. No need for Draco to know that he had shrunken it himself. "Ah, I should have had father do the same instead of carrying it around like a muggle," Draco stated bitterly. "Are you going to do anything about this?" he asked, looking around. Harry smirked as he saw what Draco was talking about. Since they entered the train, a small group of girls had been crowding around, giggling, while those already in compartments threw open their doors and made room for him to sit. "What makes you think it's my fault?" Harry mock asked. Draco shot him a blank look with a single raised brow and question. "Fine, let's try to find an empty compartment," Harry stated, striding ahead. Ducking into an empty compartment, Draco watched in fascination as the girls walked on by without even sparing them a glance. He turned to Harry with a raised eyebrow. It's a simple illusion spell I read about. Harry lied. Draco simply nodded and turned to the window. Spotting his parents, he waved as the train's horn sounded and the vehicle began to move. Hogwarts, here I come, Harry thought with a grin. Chapter 3 School. Saturday, August 31st, 1991. The first few hours of the trip were uneventful, mostly due to their compartment being hidden from all other students. Harry and Draco spent that time changing into their all-black school robes, and then they sat down to talk about Quidditch, Hogwarts and the Four Houses, while Draco talked and Harry listened. After 45 minutes of this, Draco introduced him to Exploding Snap, a magical card game. After his third loss at the game, Harry suggested they play something else. Getting an affirmation from Draco, he drew his phoenix wand, suppressing a shudder as he did, and conjured up a shogi board. He had learned all about the game from the memories of his ancestor, and having become interested in the game had bought books about it as a child. Using the strategies Naruto had been taught by his friend and comrade Shikamaru Nara, Harry taught Draco how to play the foreign board game. After grumbling about muggles and their uselessness for a while, Draco grasped the theory behind the game, and actually began to enjoy himself. They played a few rounds with Harry winning each one before they took a break from the game. After a while, Harry took down the illusion around their compartment. Most of the girls had given up their search for the two boys, and other than the odd student walking about the hallways were silent. Hey, let's go look for my friends. They should be somewhere on the train and I can introduce you. Draco offered, opening the compartment door. Might as well, there's not much else to do, Harry replied, following behind the blonde. As Draco stepped out into the hall, he was knocked down as someone walked into him. Smirking to himself, Harry stepped into the hallway. He found the person to be a young girl who looked to be roughly the same age as Draco, and she had long bushy brown hair, brown eyes, and wore the plain robes of a first year. Behind the girl stood a pudgy blonde-haired boy. He also wore first-year robes and was looking from Draco to Harry with fright. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there, the girl apologized. She withered as Draco glared at her. Watch where you're going next time, woman, I show dash. He was cut off as Harry put a hand on his shoulder. Sending his friend a reproachful glance, Harry smiled at the two others. Be nice, Draco, she already apologized. He chided. Draco huffed and stood up. Holding out a hand to the girl, Harry helped her to her feet. I hope you're not hurt, he said, smiling. She blushed as his allure hit her but managed to shake her head wildly. Harry grinned wider as he heard Draco scoff from behind him. My name is Harry Potter and the rude boy behind me is Draco Malfoy. Who might you two be? He asked softly. The girl snapped her head up at his question with a blush. She had been preoccupied studying his hand, which she still held onto. Oh, I'm Hermione Granger, the girl replied hurriedly. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Granger, Harry stated. Her blush doubled in intensity as he brought her hand to his lips and brushed his lips on the knuckles. And Neville L. Longbottom, the boy squeaked. Harry gave him a nod, but inside he was frowning. The boy's magical signature felt familiar. It wasn't something he had come across before, but he felt as if he should recognize the energy signature. Shrugging mentally, he filed this point away for another time. Most likely he was a descendant of someone his ancestor had known, and he was comparing the signature with that of a memory. Wait, you're Harry Potter? I've read all about you, you're famous, Hermione exclaimed, somewhat regaining her senses. She was about to continue on but lost her train of thought as Harry placed a long, delicate finger to her lips. Not here, Miss Granger, too many curious ears. Perhaps we can speak more at a later time, Harry stated. The girl nodded shakily and finally released his hand, taking a step back with her blush back in place. Giving her another smile and nodding to the Longbottom once more, Harry walked past the two with a frowning Draco following behind. After a few minutes he looked back to his friend, who still had a deep frown on his face. What's your problem, Draco? You can't still be angry over that little accident, can you? He asked his blonde friend. As he spoke, Harry threw up some illusions around them to keep the conversation secret and to avoid a repeat of their last walk through the train. It's not that, it's that girl. I've never heard of a family named Granger, Draco replied with a scowl. So what? Harry asked curiously. So, she's a Muggleborn then? Draco spat back. And? Harry asked, raising a single brow in question. The girl was a mudblood and you were being all nice to her. Muggleborns don't belong in our society. They should just be killed off or left to rot with the Muggles. Draco spat back. Harry came to a stop and turned to his friend. Draco staggered back a step as rage-filled green eyes bore into his. You would do best to watch what you say around me, Draco. I don't tolerate prejudice and bigotry. Unlike you who has spent his entire life living in the wizarding world, I have been living with muggles, so I know how horrible they can be. But I also know that not all muggles are bad. This also extends to muggleborn. Feel free to hate them as you wish, but keep it to yourself. I prefer to get to know someone before making a decision about them, he replied with a cold, icy tone. Draco could only nod in reply. He could feel the magic swirling in the air around his friend, and it frightened him more than the anger flashing through Harry's eyes. He made a mental note not to cross Harry without due cause. Seeing his friend nod, Harry let up on the killer intent he was producing and backed off. Now then, Draco, why is it you hate her for simply being born to muggles? Harry asked, turning away. Draco blinked rapidly as his friend calmly walked away like the last few seconds hadn't happened. Walking fast to catch up, Draco pondered the question for a second before replying. Our father says that they're trying to force their customs on us and make our world more like theirs. Also, with more muggleborn being born each year, the bloodlines are weakening. Well, that's just silly, Harry stated, frowning. Seeing all the things muggles have come up with and done, I don't see what's so bad about integrating the two societies. Draco frowned back at him. Why should we have anything to do with Phil muggles? We are superior and our society is better. They should simply bow to us, he replied. Harry broke out in laughter at that comment, causing Draco's scowl to deepen. Wizards aren't superior to muggles, Draco. Muggles have weapons and technology that would put most wizards to shame. Besides, being a wizard or a muggle shouldn't matter, you're all human in the end, Harry commented. Of course, he counted himself exempt from that statement. Let the humans fight amongst themselves. He was a magical creature, so he could care less. Draco sneered and was about to reply, but Harry cut him off. That's just my opinion, Draco. You don't have to share it, and I won't force my beliefs on you. I just ask that you treat any friends of mine, no matter how pure their blood may be, with some modicum of respect, Harry stated, narrowing his eyes at Draco and spiking his killing intent to make sure the point stuck. Draco gulped as something flashed in his friend's eyes once more, something dangerous. Fine, he conceded. Harry's demeanor instantly changed, and he smiled widely at the blonde boy. Good, I'm glad that's settled. Draco? A voice cut into their conversation. Turning, Harry spotted the source as a tall, dark-skinned boy with short black hair and eyes. The boy was currently squinting at them as he somehow managed to pierce the low-level illusion around them. Harry frowned as he dropped the illusion. Even though it was low-level, no human should have been able to see through it unless they were of significant power, something the first-year boy before him was definitely lacking. He pondered this as he observed the boy. He looked human, but there was definitely a small difference with his magical signature. Perhaps some creature blood in his line? That may have been enough to see through that weak genjutsu, Harry thought, observing the boy. It is you. Where have you been, Draco? We searched everywhere and didn't see you. The boy continued, oblivious to Harry's thoughts or observation. Blaze! Draco exclaimed. Good to see you, mate. I was with my new friend here and we were hiding from some girls, Draco replied. The boy Blaze seemed to notice Harry for the first time and nodded to him in greeting before holding out a hand. I can see why. Nice to meet you. My name's Blaze Zabini. I'm another of Draco's friends, Blaze stated. Shaking the boy's hand, Harry smiled thinly. Harry Potter. It's nice to meet you, Blaze, he replied politely. Blaze's eyes widened as he shot a look to Draco. Draco nodded in reply and Blaze's eyes snapped back to Harry's. Wow, the Harry Potter. Wait till the others meet you. Come on, Draco, our compartment's down this way, Blaze stated, leading them back the way they had come. They walked past a couple compartments before Blaze stopped and opened the door to one compartment. Hey guys, I found Draco and you'll never guess who he's with, Blaze announced, entering the compartment. Draco followed behind him, receiving greetings from the others within. Harry entered last and took a moment to survey the compartment. Other than he, Draco and Blaze, there were 6 others inside the compartment, 3 girls and 3 boys. Who's this then? One of the girls asked. Harry's smile turned into a grin as his allure hit the group, causing the 3 girls to blush lightly and look him over several times. Nice to meet you all. I'm Harry Potter, Draco's friend, he replied politely. There was a gasp as they all heard his name. He noted that several eyes turned to his forehead in search of his scar, which was hidden behind his hair. After a moment and some assurance from Draco, they welcomed him to the group and introduced themselves. I'm Pansy Parkinson, one of the girls stated boldly. She had short black hair that stopped at neck level and black eyes. While not the best looking of the 3, Harry counted her as one of the prettier girls he had met so far. Charmed, he replied, bowing down and kissing her hand. She blushed darker and looked away shyly. Another one of the girls pushed her aside in order to introduce herself. Millicent Bulstrode, nice to meet you, Harry, she stated eagerly, giving him her hand to kiss. She had long brown hair that draped down to her shoulders and bright blue eyes. Harry gave her a smile as he kissed her offered hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, he replied softly. Millicent giggled as she sat down next to Pansy and they began to whisper to each other. The last girl sat up and held out a hand as well. Daphne Greengrass, she stated briskly. She had long blonde hair that was tied back in a ponytail with one long bang trailing down the right side of her face. Her eyes were a darker shade of blue than Millicent's, but shined just as brightly. Overall, she was the prettiest of the three and seemed to be the one in charge, since the other girls were sending her small glances when they had made their own introductions. Harry brought her hand to his lips as well and noted that she had tried to fight off the blush that was attempting to spread across her cheeks. He sent her a warm smile backed by his allure, and her defenses shattered. She blushed brightly and backed away to join her friends. Chuckling to himself, Harry turned to the three boys who had sat back to watch the introductions from the girls. They were all shooting him wry grins while watching the girls converse in whispers. A tall, dark blonde boy next to Draco gave him a lazy wave before introducing himself as Theodore Knott. And these two here are Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle, Theodore explained, pointing to the two last boys. They were both extremely large for their age, standing a few inches taller than him. Both looked similar to the other except Crabbe had black hair and black eyes while Goyle had brown hair and brown eyes. The two gave a simple grunt in response. Harry nodded to the boys and joined them on their side of the compartment, since the girls were still in whispered conversation. They spoke for a few minutes about the coming school year and the past Quidditch season. All conversation stopped as the compartment door slid open and a familiar figure stuck their head into the compartment. Hello again, Hermione, Harry greeted with a smile. The girl who had been about to speak startled at the sound of her name but smiled when she spotted Harry smiling at her. Hi again, Harry, she replied softly. Well? What do you want? Pansy snapped at her angrily. Hermione seemed to snap out of a daze as she remembered what she had come for. Oh, sorry, I was wondering if any of you have seen a toad. Neville here lost his, she stated, pointing out Neville, who was standing behind her looking shy and afraid. No, we haven't. Can I ask what the toad's name is? Harry asked, standing up. T.T. Trevor, Neville stuttered out. Forcing down a shudder, as he drew his phoenix wand once more, Harry held his wand elegantly as he called on his reserves. Accio Trevor the Toad, he whispered. Neville and Hermione were forced to step aside as a small green object hurtled down the hallway and into the compartment. Both turned to see a large green toad in Harry's hand. There you go, Harry stated calmly as he held out his hand. Neville cheered up slightly and smiled. Oh, thank you, he said, taking the toad and walking down the hallway. Thanks for the help, Harry, Hermione said, smiling. It was my pleasure, Harry replied with his own smile. The girl flushed and with a muttered goodbye closed the compartment door and strolled away. Who was that? Pansy asked, sneering at the door. Some muggle-born girl we ran into earlier. She seems quite taken with Harry, Draco replied, sending a nervous glance at his friend at his near slip-up. A mudblood? Why would you associate with filth like that? Pansy spat out. She immediately squeaked as the entire compartment seemed to freeze over. Pansy and the rest let out a slight whimper as Harry regarded them with cold eyes. As he looked at each of them, they shivered as fear spread through their bodies. Only Draco seemed to be better off since he had dealt with this side of his friend before. Don't insult my friends, Harry stated in an icy tone. Each word was punctuated by a spike of his killer intent. The other teens in the room nodded rapidly, finding themselves unable to speak due to the pressure and tension in the room. As quick as it had come, the feeling disappeared and Harry gave them all a smile once more. The room seemed to brighten up again and all feelings of coldness and fear vanished. Good. Like I told Draco earlier, you can all have your silly little prejudices, but please try not to insult anyone that happens to be my friend, Harry stated calmly. Like his ancestor before him, he cherished those that he could call his friends, which at this point in time was a very small list made up of Hermione and those in this compartment. Although he wouldn't trust them until he got to know them better, he would still defend his friends until they proved they were undeserving of his friendship. And there was also the fact that he was a demon. Demons were very possessive and would fiercely protect those they claimed as theirs. His fellow first years settled down after the dangerous atmosphere had faded. They still sent him wary looks, but his demonic allure, warm smile and natural charm easily dissuaded any fears they may have had. The rest of the train ride was spent in enjoyable conversation, and Harry got the chance to teach Theo and Blaise how to play shogi as well. The two boys easily learned the game and after an hour could play almost as well as Draco. Although they were still beginners, Harry speculated that with a few months of practice they may be able to give him a slight challenge. He wasn't much of a strategist but was definitely better at it than his ancestor, although he was nowhere near Shikamaru's brilliance. After a few hours the train docked at Hogsmeade and they were allowed off the train. Following behind Draco and the others, Harry exited the train onto the platform. He took a look around and noted all the other students milling about. Past the group of students he spotted a familiar figure as Hagrid towered above them out. Furzius Ourier. Furzius the half-giant shouted, his voice boomed above all other sounds, drawing everyone's attention. Walking beside Draco, Harry made his way through the crowd towards Hagrid. Harry, good to see you. Hagrid boomed when he spotted him. It's good to see you as well, Hagrid. Are you the one in charge of the first years? Harry replied politely. A glance at his friends warned them about disrespecting the half-giant. They received the message and promptly closed their mouths. That's right, I'll be taking you all to the castle. Hagrid replied, seeing that the first years had all gathered around while the other years made a beeline for some carriages. Hagrid smiled at Harry before addressing the group. Harry scowled as he felt a presence resonate with his. Looking around he spotted the source. At first he had missed them when surveying the area, but now that he paid attention to his senses he could easily spot the thestrals that pulled the carriages. He could feel the demonic blood within them as sure as they could feel his. Some had even stopped to stare at him before the magic on the carriages compelled them to make way towards the castle. Spreading out his senses, Harry locked onto the various creatures in the surrounding area. There was of course Hagrid, who stood just a few feet away, but he could also sense a myriad of creatures in the nearby forest and lake. All of which were too weak to sense him. At most the only beings powerful and pure enough to sense his nature were the thestrals, who had some of the purest demonic blood out there, the giant squid which had lived for eons and was powerful enough to sense him, and lastly were the elder mermaids and centaurs, who were also alerted of his presence due to their age and accumulation of power. There were also some unicorns that could sense him, but that was only due to his being a powerful dark creature. He spiked his demonic aura slightly, causing Hagrid to startle a bit and glance about, while some other students blushed red as his allure washed over them. Harry waited a moment, but there was no returning spike. He had just challenged the other creatures to enter their territory. None had accepted his challenge. Either the other creatures didn't care or they were unaware of his challenge. He was betting on the latter, since the creatures in the area were just shells of their past glory and didn't know much about their heritage. Considering the fact that hundreds of different creatures co-inhabited the same area, they had definitely forgotten the ancient laws on territory. Since he didn't have to worry about fighting another creature in the near future, Harry returned his attention to Hagrid, who was speaking. At some point in time he had followed with the group of students, and now stood at the edge of a lake with several boats floating before them. Joining Draco, Theo and Blaise in one boat, Harry settled down as they glided across the surface of the large lake towards the castle in the distance. His friends spoke with each other calmly while paying little attention to what Hagrid was saying. He briefly wondered if they would remain this calm if they knew the boat was being shadowed by a giant squid. The upper-tier demon had been following their boat since they reached deeper waters. Harry could sense no ill intent from the squid. Although old and powerful, it was still young for one of its kind and held a sort of childlike innocence, so only chose to follow along and send him simple messages through its aura. Harry played around with the squid as they traveled, sending back messages and images with his aura, but eventually was forced to say goodbye as the boats reached shallow water and docked. The other students squealed in fear as a large tentacle rose from the water and seemed to wave, but Harry only smiled calmly and waved back. The squid sent a final goodbye before diving deeper into the lake. A/N. Just wanted to take a moment and explain the demon/summon creature tiers. There are 7 tiers in total, and I'll be listing them below. All tiers are based from Harry's perspective only. First tier, lower tier, weakest creatures, usually unintelligent. X. Flobberworms, Mandrakes, Horklump. Second tier, lower tier, weak creatures, low intelligence. X. Imps, Pixies, Gnomes. Third tier, mid-tier, difficult creatures, some intelligence. X. Hippogriff, Griffin, Grindylow. Fourth tier, mid-tier, strong creatures, low to high intelligence. X. Thestrals, Trolls, Acromantula. Fifth tier, mid-tier, stronger creatures, low to high intelligence. X. Dragon, Sphinx, Chimera. Sixth tier, upper tier, strongest creatures, high intelligence, usually sentient. X. Phoenix, Basilisk, Unicorn. Seventh tier, upper tier, strong to strongest creatures, high intelligence, always sentient, usually humanoid. X. Centaur, Werewolf, Dementa. 7th tier is one of the least dangerous since they can usually be reasoned with. 6th tier holds most of the powerful light creatures, making them the most dangerous for him. Some 5th to 6th tier creatures can be more powerful than 7th tier creatures. Harry frowned as he stepped onto the shore. Halfway through the trip he had begun to sense something as he approached the castle, several somethings in fact. He was unsure what they were, but his bet was on powerful creatures, one of which was most likely the phoenix he had read about in Hogwarts, a history. Hagrid led them towards the large gates of the castle, and raising one large fist pounded 3 times on the door. The door swung open immediately, and standing behind them was a tall, stern-looking witch. She had piercing green eyes and graying black hair tied in a bun with a pointy black hat on top. Her robes were green in color with a red trim. "The first year's Professor McGonagall," Hagrid stated to the woman. "Thank you, Hagrid, I'll handle things from here," McGonagall replied. Nodding to the witch and sending Harry a parting smile, Hagrid lumbered off into the castle. Harry whistled as McGonagall pulled the doors wide and led them in. The entrance hall of the castle was extremely large. The room seemed to go so high that the ceiling was hidden in shadows, and he could most likely fit the Dursleys' entire house within the room and still have some space left over. As soon as he stepped past the threshold, Harry gasped in pain. His senses were being assaulted by many different presences, and the amount of energy floating freely within the castle was not helping. It took all his willpower to ignore them and follow along with the group without arousing much suspicion. His friends had sent him some worried glances, but he had waved them off, assuring them he was okay. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor towards a small door. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a large doorway to the right as they passed it. The rest of the school must have already arrived. Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small, empty chamber off the hall and silenced them all with a piercing glare. "Welcome to Hogwarts," McGonagall announced. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because, while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room," she explained. Taking a pause and glancing around the room, she continued on. "The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting," she finished. "I shall return for you when we are ready for you. Please wait quietly." Turning, she swept out of the room and through another door to the side. As the other students broke out in whispers, Harry closed his eyes and focused on the presences assaulting his senses. They would keep bothering him until he acknowledged them. The first was the magic of the castle itself. That was of no concern since they were only acknowledging him and tying him to the wards, something that was happening with the other students as well, although none of them were able to sense it like he could. The next few were fellow creatures within the castle itself. Above him on the highest floor was a summoned creature, most likely the phoenix based on the revulsion the presence brought him. Deep below him was a powerful upper-tier demon kind. It was currently in a state of hibernation though, so he didn't have to worry about it right now. Next was another summoned creature a few floors above him. This was also an upper-tier creature but was far below the phoenix, so it wasn't anything for him to worry about. In the same area as that creature was a lesser demon kind around mid-tier but powerful all the same. Harry fingered his daggers under his robes uneasily. He may have the knowledge and practice, but he wasn't at all sure of his chances against the 2 powerful creatures he was sensing. He vowed to increase his training and watch his back while in Hogwarts. The place wasn't turning out to be as safe and carefree as he had expected. He could also sense a few other strange presences within the castle. A few belonged in the lower tiers and were coming from around him and behind the door McGonagall had entered, those he pegged as the witches and wizards with creature blood or demonic wand cores. And then there were the plants, those he simply just pushed away from his mind. Far too many magical plants carried demonic traits. None would be an issue to him. After all, his Mokuton was all but mastered. Elemental manipulation was one of his easier skills to master. Demons were creatures of the dark and all elements stemmed from the dark in some form. Fire, lightning and light were all out of his full control, but he could still use them to a certain degree. Water, earth, wind and darkness on the other hand, well, those he could wield like they were an extension of himself. Harry's senses continued to search as he sorted through all the presences he felt. Another presence was felt a few floors up and was also with the other 2 creatures he had sensed before. This one had mid-upper tier power, but the strange thing was that he could sense no life from it at all. In fact, it felt like an object rather than a creature. Curious. The last presence he could sense was on one of the higher floors as well. This was a mid-lower tier creature, and like the last he could sense it was an object of some kind, except this one seemed to have some form of sentience, since he could feel it calling out to him. Strange, this would take looking into at a later time. Harry opened his eyes as he finished reviewing the presences he sensed. he startled as he came face to face with Draco, who was just a few inches away from him. Draco gulped as he found cold steel pressed up against his neck. Before any others noticed, the dagger Harry held was already deep within his robes and hidden from sight. "What?" Harry asked, calming down. "Sorry, mate, you were out of it for a bit. We tried shaking you and calling your name, but nothing worked," Theo replied from beside Draco. "I was concentrating on something, sorry to have worried you," Harry replied softly. "Was there a reason you needed me?" "Not really, the girls just thought you would want to see the ghosts," Blaise answered, pointing up. Harry looked up and noticed there were now a few ghosts floating through the room. He spotted a fat friar speaking to some kids off to the side, two of which he recognized as Hermione and Neville, while the last was some red-headed boy. "Oh cool, they are interesting," Harry stated, observing the spirits as they floated by. He smirked inwardly, though having already read about the school he had expected the ghosts, but who knew there were so many here. They would be a great help with some of the soul-based rituals he knew. Harry smirked darkly at that last thought. "Thanks for pointing them out, guys," he added, turning back to his friends. "No problem, that was a nice-looking blade you had," Draco stated, rubbing his throat. "Can I see it later?" "Sure thing, Draco, sorry about scaring you, I'm a naturally jumpy person," Harry replied. Draco laughed and waved it off. All conversations in the room ceased as McGonagall entered the room once more. Surveying them all and quieting them with a stern gaze, she spoke. "The sorting ceremony is about to start. Form a line," she stated, "and follow me." Harry smirked at his friends as they followed McGonagall. They walked out of the chamber, back across the hall and through a pair of large double doors into the great hall. The hall looked exactly as it had from his book. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating over 4 long tables, where the rest of students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers sat. Harry smiled as he spotted Snape sitting at the table. The man gave him a slight nod in greeting, which Harry returned. At the far end of the table, just 2 seats away from Snape, Harry spotted Hagrid waving at him. Professor McGonagall led the first years up to the front, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts could be seen floating around. Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. The roof was decorated just as he had expected. Behind him he heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." Harry smirked at this. Someone else had read the book as well. At least his new friend would prove to be an intelligent conversationalist. Draco and the others were smart and fun to talk with, but they weren't the kinds for long discussions or debates. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool she put a pointed wizard's hat. The sorting hat, he assumed. Everyone was staring intently at the hat. For a few seconds there was complete silence, then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal, those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends, those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on. Don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap, you're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap." The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quiet again. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Hannah Abbott." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. "Hufflepuff," the hat shouted. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. "Susan Bones." "Hufflepuff," the hat shouted again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. "Terry Boot." "Ravenclaw," the hat shouted. The table second from the left clapped this time, and several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. "Millicent Bulstrode." "Good luck," Millie Pansy whispered to her. With confidence, Millicent strode forward and sat down. She pulled the hat on and everyone waited. Seconds ticked by as everyone waited. Finally the tier opened up and the hat shouted out, "Slytherin." Smiling as she took the hat off, Millie went to sit with the Slytherins at the far right table. Michael Corner and Stephen Cornfoot were sent to Ravenclaw afterwards. Vincent Crabbe. Crabbe strode to the stool and took his seat. The hat barely covered his large head, but a moment after it was placed the rip opened, and it shouted, "Slytherin." Tracy Davis and Kevin Entwistle went to Slytherin, Justin Finch Fletchley went to Hufflepuff, Seamus Finnegan to Gryffindor, and Anthony Goldstein was a Ravenclaw. Gregory Goyle. Goyle grunted and strode to the front of the room. Taking his seat, the hat was only on his head for a moment before it shouted out, "Slytherin." Hermione Granger. McGonagall called over the shouts of the. Harry smiled as the girl rushed past him, only slowing to nod at the word of encouragement he gave her. Taking a seat on the stool, she sat still as the hat was placed on her head. The hat was silent for a while before shouting, "Gryffindor." Daphne Greengrass. Daphne gracefully strode up to the stood and took her seat. The hat rested on her head for a few seconds before declaring her a Slytherin. Wayne Hopkins and Megan Jones were declared Hufflepuffs, while Sully was a Ravenclaw. When Neville Longbottom was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. Harry gave the boy an encouraging smile as he picked himself up. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, "Gryffindor," Neville was so excited that he ran off still wearing the hat, and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to Morag McDougal, who became a Ravenclaw. Harry was surprised at the hat's choice. He had been told that Gryffindors were brave, and from what he had seen of Neville so far, the boy was anything but brave and courageous. Ernie Macmillan was the last boy to be sorted to Hufflepuff. Then it was Draco's turn. He walked nonchalantly up to the stool and pulled the hat on, but didn't get a chance to sit down before it screamed out, "Slytherin." Draco winked at Harry, waved to his friends, and went to join Crabbe, Goyle, and Millicent at the Slytherin table. Next was Theo. He swaggered up just as casually as Draco. The hat took a few seconds before calling out, "Slytherin." Pansy Parkinson. Harry gave her a whispered good luck as she passed by. Pansy smiled at him before hurrying on, blush present. "Slytherin." A pair of twin girls, Padma and Parvati Patil, were next, Padma to Ravenclaw and Parvati to Gryffindor. Sally Ann Perks went to Hufflepuff. Harry Potter. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out all over the hall. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? He's so cute." The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. The next second he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Harry perked up as he felt a presence within his mind. Said a small voice in his ear. "I need you to lower your acclimacy shields, Mr. Potter," the hat stated after a moment. The whispers increased in strength as the older students pondered how a first-year knew acclimacy. At the head table, Snape shot the headmaster a meaningful look that seemed to scream, "Do you believe me now?" But Dumbledore ignored it as his eyes focused on the boy sitting on the stool. Meanwhile, on the stool, Harry was silently cursing. He should have figured out the hat viewed the thoughts of those it was placed on. Had he known, he could have created a false set of memories and thoughts for it to view. Now it was too late, and he couldn't think of anything that wouldn't end with him having to lower his shields and having his secrets known. Suddenly thinking up a reckless but profitable plan, Harry decided to turn this event in his favor. Pretending to wring his hands in his lap, he rapidly went through hand seals and cast a quick but powerful illusion over the hall that would skew the victim's perception of time. To the others, only a second would pass while he would have a full minute. As the illusion took effect, Harry dropped his shields. He felt the hat enter his mind, but with a bit of concentration pushed it out while following behind. He plunged into the hat's mind and drained all he found within. Its memories, thoughts, and knowledge were all drained out and stored into a separate part of his mind. Unfortunately, other than a map of the school, the hat only contained the memories of the students it had sorted today, and those, like everything else the hat had once known, would be destroyed after the sorting. Harry trashed the memories but decided to keep the map. After all, it would pay to know his way around the school. As the minute ended, Harry created a false set of memories and thrust them at the hat, making it think it had already viewed his and chose where to sort him. Just as the illusion fell and everyone returned to normal, the hat shouted out, "Slytherin." The entire hall remained silent in shock as he stood and removed the hat. McGonagall shot him a surprised look, and Hagrid looked shocked while Dumbledore looked pensive from his seat. Snape gave him a slight smirk and nod as he passed by on his way to the Slytherin table. After a few moments of silence, Draco and the others stood and clapped as their friend made his way over. The other students eventually joined in, but Harry was surprised to see the older Slytherins shooting him looks of disdain. Taking a seat between Draco and Pansy, Harry turned his attention back to the sorting, ignoring the various looks he was receiving. There were only 4 people left now. Dean Thomas, a tall boy with warm dark brown skin, went to Gryffindor. Lisa Turpin was a Ravenclaw, and then it was the redhead who was standing by Hermione and Neville earlier. Ron Weasley. He heard Draco scoff and mutter something that sounded like blood traitors as Weasley staggered up to the stool and almost collapsed on top of it. The hat was silent for only a few seconds before shouting out, Gryffindor. Harry watched as the now white-faced boy made his way over to where 3 other redheads, who Draco muttered were his brothers, sat and collapsed. They were all patting him on the back and congratulating him. Blaise Zabini. Blaise, like his friends before him, strode confidently up to the stool. The hat was barely on his head before it shouted out, Slytherin! For everyone to hear. Jumping off the stool, Blaise made his way towards the Slytherin table to join his friends. Since Blaise was the last student, Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. The hall went silent as the headmaster got to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms opened wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. Harry smirked at this. While Dumbledore appeared kind and grandfatherly, you could also sense the power and danger hidden just under the surface. Welcome, he shouted. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are: Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you. Harry stifled a laugh at the end of his speech. The man sounded like he was off his rocker, but a look into his eyes proved he was far from it. Is he a mad? He heard Draco ask. Oh my word, yes, one of the older students answered. Great wizard, mind you, but quite a bit off his rocker. Harry smirked at the answer, and ignoring the looks of disdain from most his table, and the awe-filled glances from the others, he dug into the food that had appeared before them. As he ate, he felt a chill from nearby and looked to his right to see a horribly disfigured ghost sitting 1 seat away. He had blank, staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood. Welcome, Mr. Potter, the Bloody Baron said softly. You will do quite well in Slytherin. Thank you, Harry replied politely. The ghost interested him as it sat and watched him eat. There were so many soul rituals, he was just itching to try if he could just get his hands on one of these ghosts. Harry shuddered as he fought down a feeling of revulsion. His head turned around, searching for the source. The Bloody Baron gave him a curious look before shrugging and floated off down the table. Harry gulped as he found the source of the feeling. Perched on top of one of the Gryffindor flags was a flaming phoenix, the headmaster's phoenix, Fawkes. Fawkes perched on its spot, staring towards him with its small black eyes. At this time, many others had also spotted the bird and had traced its line of sight back to the boy who lived. Rearing back its head, Fawkes gave a trill of phoenix song that cheered those who heard it. Some, like Albus Dumbledore, Hagrid and McGonagall, noticed who the phoenix was looking at as it sang. They smiled in delight. Others, like Quirrell and the Slytherins, noticed as well, and they frowned. But only Severus Snape noticed the shudder and flash of disgust that flashed across the young boy's face. Harry sighed as he wiped the blood onto his robes. He had only been in the common room for 5 minutes before he and his friends had been surrounded by the other Slytherins. Of course, they blamed him for the death of their precious Dark Lord and thought it was an insult he was placed into such a noble house as Slytherin. Well, some of them did. The females were mostly just there to watch as they were entrapped by his allure. This, of course, just made the boys angrier. Harry had simply stood back and watched them shout and threaten him. But then it happened. Draco had chosen to stand up for his friend rather than side with the other Slytherins. So one boy had decided to put him in his place. That had been a mistake. Draco stared wide-eyed at the display. One moment he had been standing up for his new friend, and some 5th year had drawn his wand and a small green ball of light was sent his way. Draco had closed his eyes and prepared himself for whatever effect the spell would bring. It never came. Cracking his eyes open, he had been shocked to see the luminescent green emeralds of Harry's eyes staring back at him. There was blood trailing down a cut on his forearm where the spell had hit, but Harry didn't even seem to notice it as he stared at Draco. Draco was getting scared now. Harry wasn't moving at all as he stared at him. For a moment he thought he had been hit by a petrification spell as well and was going to call for help, but then the statuesque form of his friend spoke. Are you okay, Draco? His voice was as light as always, but one could hear the unbridled rage hidden within. Harry suppressed a wince at the stinging on his arm. He was pushing against his magic, forcing it back from the wound since it wouldn't do to have his wounds heal miraculously fast in front of witnesses. It was also for this reason he had allowed the spell to hit. He had many ways to block, destroy, or deflect it, but he chose to conserve his strength and the full scope of his abilities. For now. That fifth year would need to be taught a lesson, though. The spell he had fired had been powerful enough to cut his demonic skin. Imagine what it could have done had it hit Draco. No, the boy would need to be taught a very important lesson about attacking Harry Potter's friends. Draco nodded his head shakily, relieved that Harry seemed to be okay. Harry gave him a calming smile before turning his hate-filled eyes on the crowd. A few of the younger students flinched back, some blushed and smiled at him seductively, while the older students studied him warily. Taking full view of the room, Harry locked eyes with the smirking fifth year as the boy twirled his wand. The boy smirked at him as his eyes played over the gash running down Harry's arm. "You can hate me, insult me and curse me. But if any of you ever attack one of my friends again, I will kill you," Harry stated icily. His inner Uzumaki was shining through, but his demonic nature was still focused and ready to attack at a moment's notice. The fifth year sneered at him and stopped twirling his wand. The other students had either backed off a little at his threat — this group was composed mostly of the younger students and all the females — or decided to call his bluff, and the boy who had hit him with the cutting spell was feeling confident due to his injury. "Big threats from someone who's bleeding all over the floor, Potter," the boy snarled out. "Maybe it would be best to back off, Higgs," one of the older students stated. He, like a few of the other seventh years, was experienced enough to see the dangerous glint that had passed through Harry's eyes. They could also sense some of the power usually bound tightly within him as his control slipped and tendrils of power lashed out. "Bugger off, Samant, he's just a kid trying to look tough," the boy, Terence Higgs, replied. At this time, Pansy, who had been looking over the shaken Draco, chose to speak up. "Back off, you prat. Leave Harry alone, he didn't do anything to you," she shouted. The boy growled and raised his wand towards her. A few of the other students called out a warning or tried to stop him, but they were too slow. As Higgs uttered the first syllable to the spell, his eyes widened in shock. Unlike most of the others who were looking at either him or Pansy, Terence had kept his eyes locked on Harry in order to taunt him as he cast his spell. That's why he was one of the few that saw as the boy simply disappeared, only to reappear a few meters away with his fist buried in Terence's gut. Higgs gasped in pain as he doubled over onto Harry's arm. All noise in the room ceased as everyone watched in shock and awe as Harry demolished the fifth year. As Higgs doubled over, Harry had grabbed him by the hair and, pulling up slightly, proceeded to slam the boy face first into the floor. A few winced as they heard the crack of a broken nose. Pulling the head up again, Harry slammed his face into the floor and repeated the action. By the time he stopped, Terence was covered in blood that flowed from his broken nose and mouth. Many of his teeth layered the ground as the blood pooled around them. Harry stared at the broken boy apathetically before lightly tossing him aside and standing, impassively glancing at the shocked faces of the other students. He simply wiped the blood on his hands off onto his robes. "Don't make me repeat myself. Leave my friends alone," Harry stated. Those who had either backed off already or were wary nodded. A few of the boys, however, growled and circled him. There were 4 of them, all in the same year as Higgs, so most likely his friends. As they went to draw their wands, Harry attacked. His right hand flew to the watch on his left wrist, and with a push, a high-powered spell flew towards one of the boys. A gray ball of light with a red core slammed into one boy's chest, and in an instant he dropped to the ground as ropes were conjured to bind his limbs. Harry smirked at the first real testing of his new watch. Although it was originally built to only fire low-level spells, he had torn down the old enchantments, and with a bit of seal work and his own enchanting, he had rebuilt it to be far more powerful. Unfortunately, the watch could only be programmed once due to the detail-oriented nature of seals. Harry had programmed the third function of the watch with both the Stupefy and Incarcerus spells, making it ideal for capturing wizards. As the spell fired from his watch, Harry was already moving. In a blur of movement, he appeared midair in front of the much taller boy with his fist cocked back. Making sure to pull back on his considerable demonic strength, he brought his fist down on the boy's face. For the first time since entering the common room, a grin spread across Harry's face. His friends shuddered when they saw it. This wasn't one of his kind, heart-fluttering smiles. No, this smile was filled with pure malice and bloodlust. His face was twisted with dark glee as the older boy's nose broke and his fist drove him head first into the ground, rendering him unconscious. By this time, the last 2 boys had drawn their wands and locked onto him. "Stupefy," one shouted. "Petrificus totalis," the other called out. The ball of red light flew quickly, followed by a gray light. Harry dodged the stunner as he leapt away from the downed student. The full body bind dissipated as it hit the shield provided by his amulet. Harry smirked as the seals on the back of the amulet activated. He could feel as the magic was drawn from the offending spell and added to his reserves. The power that had been drained by his watch was already half returned thanks to the amulet. Before the 2 could fire off another spell, Harry had disappeared in a blur of movement, and the two gulped as wood and steel pressed up against their necks. This was the scene Severus Snape walked in on as he came to check up with the prefects. A group of frightened but impressed Slytherins stood watching a blood-soaked Harry Potter as he stood within the circle they formed. 3 unconscious bodies lay scattered around him, their blood soaking the floor as he stood with his wand and a dagger pressed against the necks of 2 other boys and a look of dark glee placed firmly on his face. Snape coughed loudly from the entrance, all eyes turned towards him. "Well, isn't this interesting?" he drawled out in his bored tone. No one made a sound, they just continued looking from him to Potter, who had yet to move a muscle. Snape resisted the urge to twitch as the boy just looked at him without a care in the world. "Pusey, Bletchley, take those 3 to the hospital wing." Snape snarled at the 2 at the point of Harry's weapons. They gladly rushed away, levitating the forms of their 3 friends. Harry finally put his wand and dagger away once it was safe. "Warrington, go with them," he snapped at one of the prefects. The boy nodded dumbly before rushing off. "The rest of you off to bed." The crowd broke off, heading to their various rooms. "That includes you too, Mr. Potter," he added when the boy hung back, most likely expecting punishment or demands for an explanation. Harry shrugged and followed after his friends. "Oh, and Potter," Snape called out. Harry stopped and looked back. "I had been asked by the headmaster to see if you wanted to switch houses," Snape drawled. Taking a look at the blood-soaked floor, he smirked. "But it seems you'll fit in perfectly around here." Harry smirked. Chapter 4, Hogwarts. Sunday, September 1st, 1991. Harry groaned as he rolled out of bed. A look at his watch showed it to be 5 a.m., his regular waking time. Stretching out his arms until his bones popped, he lazily rose from his bed and wandered to the bathroom. He growled in disgust as he noticed the dried blood on his arm and hands. He had been too tired to clean it up last night. Thankfully, his wound had healed up on the walk to his bedroom last night, so he didn't need to worry about stains on his bed. After finishing up in the bathroom, Harry quickly dressed in a pair of exercise clothes and made his way out of the common room. Using the knowledge he stole from the Sorting Hat, he quickly made his way to the entrance hall and out onto the grounds. 2 hours later, Harry had finished his morning exercises, which consisted of a run around the lake, a few hundred push-ups and sit-ups before practicing his taijutsu and kenjutsu with his daggers. After all that, he spent half an hour meditating to clear his mind, reinforce his barriers and strengthen his control over his core. Around 7:35, Harry made his way back into the common room. Breakfast was in 25 minutes, so he wasn't surprised that the room was mostly empty. What did surprise him was when a group of 6 older students rose from their seats and made their way over to him. He noticed that one of them was Higgs, who was currently sneering at him. The look just made him look ridiculous due to the bandages covering his broken nose and the short length of his teeth, which had yet to fully grow back. One of them, a tall blonde-haired girl with violet eyes, spoke first. "Good morning, Potter. Mind joining us for a chat?" she asked kindly. As she spoke, her eyes roamed over his sweat-drenched form, lingering on the muscles that showed through his wet shirt. "As you can most likely see, I'm in dire need of a shower. Can this wait?" Harry replied politely. The girl smiled as she lifted her wand purifico. Harry sighed as the cleaning spell hit him, and he was made proper once more. "Very well, let's talk," he said, slightly annoyed. Grinning widely, the girl grabbed hold of his arm and led him towards a group of seats. The others followed behind. "Well, where should I begin?" the girl hummed lightly, playing with his hair. The others shot her annoyed looks, which she ignored. Harry simply remained silent and observant, and after a moment she spoke again. "You see, Harry, can I call you Harry?" she asked. He gave her a nod. "Thank you. Well, you see, Harry, we're what's known as the Slytherin Council. The council is made up of the best students of each year, and our job is to handle all affairs that happen within and outside the house. We are each in charge of our year, and it is our responsibility, as the leaders, to watch out for our fellow Slytherins," she explained. "It's also the reason that you haven't gotten in trouble over the fight last night. Since Higgs here started it, you were in no way at fault, and everyone knows not to share such information outside the house," one of the older boys added. "There may be rumors around the school, but no Slytherin will agree or deny them." "Okay," Harry replied hesitantly. He had expected to get some sort of punishment for the state he put those 3 in, but it would appear that he was getting away with it. "Oh, I'm Harper Baddock, by the way, head of the 7th years." The girl added that there is Vasey Adams, head of the 6th years. A tall dark boy with dark brown hair and golden eyes nodded and gave him a wave. "You've already met Terence Higgs, head of the 5th years," she added whimsically. Terence snarled at her before continuing to glare at Harry. "Then there's Alexov Chaskevich, head of the 4th years," she stated, pointing to a tan boy with dark red hair and black eyes. Alexov gave him a small nod and Harry waved in reply. Christine Fletcher, head of the third years, Harper stated, pointing out a young girl with long black hair and gray eyes. The girl smiled and batted her lashes at him. He gave her a kind smile, causing her to blush and double her meager efforts in seducing him. Then there's Patrick Lodson, head of the second years, she said, pointing to a small pale boy with short, dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. And lastly there's you, Harry Potter, head of the first years, she finished with a flourish. Harry simply gave them a blank look. Excuse me? He asked. I believe I misheard you. You heard correctly, Harry. We want you to be head of the first years, Harper replied. Why? Well, your display yesterday for one thing. Setting aside your Hufflepuff-like behavior, you acted to protect your friends and yearmates, which is one of the functions of the council. Then there's the skill you showed. Not many could keep up with your movements, yet alone do the same. You've already proven to be far stronger than most in the house. I object to that. He didn't even use any spells. He just fought like a filthy muggle, Terence cut in angrily. Harper turned and glared at him, causing him to gulp. You should be more ashamed of that fact, Terence. You and 4 others of your year were defeated by a first year who used no magic at all. And besides, if you ask any of the 6th or 7th year students, they can tell you that Potter is very powerful magically. He keeps his core very tightly controlled, but those of us that can sense it felt some of his power last night. And there's also that spell he used to take out Malev. He didn't even use a wand, Patrick added. Terence could only sputter and shut his mouth as the other council members sided with Harper. I still don't see why you want me in your council. Yesterday most of you wanted me dead for killing your Dark Lord, Harry cut in. Oh, don't mind that. Just cause we're Slytherins doesn't mean we're Death Eaters. Most of them were just peeved that the spoiled brat boy who lived was sorted into our house. After all, we all had to go through years of listening to Professor Snape mutter about how you were being spoiled and raised to be the Gryffindor golden boy. It was only yesterday that he retracted his statements and made sure we knew to treat you like any other Slytherin, Weasley explained. Besides, Slytherins respect power, and you already proved that you're powerful. Ah, well, I suppose that makes sense. So what would I have to do as a council member? Harry asked curiously. Well, for starters, you have to look after the other first years. If they get in trouble, it's your job to find out the cause, attempt to help them get out of trouble, or just make sure the punishments are just. It's also your job to keep them in line, which is why the strongest of each year is selected for the council. Lastly, it's your job to protect Slytherin House as a whole. Do your best to gain house points and report anything suspicious to a prefect or our head of house, Professor Snape, Harper explained. Most of the other houses are against Slytherin since they think we're all evil. We need to look out for ourselves and stick together. As the first-year council member, you'll have to make sure the other first years get along, and that they are protected from the other houses, Weasley added. So will you agree to join? Kristen asked, batting her lashes at him. Harry simply shrugged. Might as well, it doesn't sound too bad. Harper clapped her hands. Goody. Welcome to the Slytherin Council, Harry, she said excitedly. We'll make sure to spread the word around. The others gave him a round of congratulations, with Higgs simply grumbling something out. Now then, on to the next item of business. Selecting the head of the council, Weasley commented. Ah yes, how will we do it this year? Alexov asked jokingly. Same as the last few hundred years, of course, free for all battle, Harper stated excitedly. Weasley groaned. Why even bother? You've won every year since your third year, Harper, he stated. Harry shot the girl an assessing look. She definitely looked harmless, and her attitude was far too cheery for someone that was used to battle, but he supposed she might just be good at hiding her skill. This was Slytherin House after all. Harper shot him a look as well, and something flashed in her eyes. Yes, but this year we have such an interesting new member. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do, she said with a grin. Higgs smirked as he stared at Harry. They could practically hear the wheels turning in his mind as he planned his revenge. Harry smirked right back. Well then, the election will take place after lunch today, Harper announced with a grin. Now then, we have 10 minutes till breakfast. Everyone is dismissed. Sighing to himself, Harry made his way back to the first-year dorms. The room was already empty, so he assumed the others were down at breakfast. Regardless of the cleaning charms, he still chose to hop in the shower quickly before grabbing a set of green robes, his watch and both wands, one hidden behind powerful illusions, of course. Where did you go this morning? Draco asked cautiously as Harry sat down beside him. Harry frowned at this. His friends had been acting differently since last night. He could easily tell that they weren't afraid of him, but they seemed to treat him with more respect and distance than before, and it was getting annoying. He had also noticed a change with the rest of Slytherin House as he walked to breakfast. Those he came across in the hallways would stop all conversations and make room for him to pass. Even now at breakfast there was a noticeable gap between his group and the rest of Slytherin House as the first years were being avoided. Exercising, Harry replied softly as he bit into a piece of toast. Draco simply nodded at his reply and continued eating his breakfast. Is that how you were able to beat those guys last night? Blaise asked. All talking at the Slytherin table stopped as everyone craned their necks to hear the conversation. A few at the head table shot them suspicious looks because of the sudden silence. Yes, it is. I like to keep fit and my speed helped greatly in that fight, Harry replied calmly. A few students nodded and talking began once more at the table. Harry sighed when he realized all the conversations were about him but shrugged it off. There wasn't really much he could do about it. Harry glared at the wall in front of him, willing it to do something. He was currently on the 7th floor of the castle, in front of a blank wall across from a tapestry. After making some excuse to ditch the others, Harry had followed his senses and sought out the presence that was calling to him. That had led him to this wall. He could feel whatever it was on the other side but had no way of reaching it. His eyes revealed a strange twist in the fabric of space on this spot, but he had no way of breaching it. Breaking down the wall wouldn't work, and as he could see, willing it to change was not working either. With a sigh, Harry turned and walked off. The presence still called to him, but until he could figure out a way past whatever barriers protected it, it would have to wait. Woof! Harry cursed as he ducked underneath a large swinging paw. The three-headed dog growled at him once more before swiping at him again. Rolling to the side, Harry fired a stunner at the dog, but it merely splashed off the creature's fur. With a growl, the creature lunged once more as one of its heads clamped its jaws around him. The dog barked curiously when its teeth passed through Harry's body as if he wasn't there at all. The three heads cocked to the side in curiosity, as they continued to attack him, but found all their attacks phasing through him with no damage. Observing the creature, Harry sighed as information on the summoned beast before him came to the front of his mind. Well, that explains what the first presence on this floor was, Harry thought, humorously ignoring the Cerberus for the door it was standing upon. I wonder what's in that trapdoor underneath it, he pondered. He could sense the presence of a demonic plant below the door, and there was also the two demon kind down within. One a creature and the other an item. Unfortunately, he would need to either kill the Cerberus or maneuver around it before he could enter the door. Any other attempts to bypass the door were blocked by the magic wards cast around the room, and he would need to become tangible to touch the door. Something he had no plans of doing until he dealt with the Cerberus. As the dog continued to swipe at him playfully, Harry pondered his choices. Killing it was certainly out since Cerberus were nearly extinct, and as a magical creature himself it was his duty to look out for other magical creatures, summon or demonic, dark, or, light. Had the Cerberus been well protected or plentiful creatures, he would have torn this one apart for even daring to attack him. Throwing the beast an annoyed glare, Harry attempted once more to speak to it, but like many other summonkind, it had forgotten how to use human speech or speak with its aura. So with a final look around the room, he made his way to the door and exited the room. Harry growled as he wandered around the dungeons looking for a hidden entrance, or something, but no matter how much he searched he could find nothing. There wasn't even a touch of magic to show a protected entrance, and it was getting annoying. He was currently in the lowest dungeon floor. Below him was an upper-tier demonic presence, but from what he could sense it was still further down, and there was no other way for him to reach it. Unlike the Cerberus on the 3rd floor, this being was not only powerful but unreachable as well. He had attempted to teleport to it, but with no idea of what lay below him and an image of his destination, he was unable to reach it. Growling once more in frustration, Harry made his way to the Great Hall once more for lunch. Placing a smile on his face, Harry entered the Great Hall and made his way over to his friends. He was glad to notice that the rest of the house was less weary of him now. Word must have spread about his induction to the council, and most were less afraid of him since it was mostly his duty to help protect them and their house. He noticed with slight annoyance that he now received awe/respect/lust-filled looks from more people, but luckily Higgs and his small group of supporters were still sending him hate-filled looks, which balanced everything out. He caught Snape's eye as he walked, and the man gave him a slight nod. Harry returned the nod before taking a seat next to Draco. He could see the curiosity in Snape's eyes every time the man looked at him. Snape knew there was something different about him, but there was no chance of him figuring it out. Harry also noticed Dumbledore watching him as he spoke with his friends. The old man gave him a kind smile when their eyes met before turning to talk with Quirrell. Quirrell. Harry frowned as he saw the man. There was something off about him. His magical aura showed up in two separate colors, and he seemed to have two souls within his body. Something had happened to the professor since they had last met in Diagon Alley, and it was not good, seeing as the leech on his soul was slowly killing him. Harry shrugged. It was none of his business. It was just one less human to deal with. His hands twitched as he looked away. He had to fight down the urge to run up there and test his outer path on the first person with 2 souls he had met since the Jinchuriki in his memories. But like his urge to experiment with the ghost, he fought it down and buried it within him. He would get his hands on Quirrell sooner or later, and then he could examine him as much as he wanted. "Harry!" a voice shouted from down the hallway. Turning around, Harry and his friends noticed the familiar form of Hermione Granger rushing up to meet them. "Go ahead without me, guys, I'll meet you in the common room," Harry stated to his friends. Any complaints they may have had were cut off with a well-placed glare. Turning, they continued on their path to the dungeons as he waited for Hermione to catch up. "Hey Harry, thanks for waiting," the girl said, catching her breath. "No problem, Hermione. So how's life in Gryffindor?" Harry asked. The girl frowned slightly. "It's not too bad. Most of them spent the whole time talking about you being in Slytherin, but so far the house is nice. Neville and I made good friends with a pair of third-year twins. They like to pull pranks, but they also have a lot of knowledge about the school and some different types of magic," she replied. "That's good. It's good to know you're making friends in your house," Harry replied with a smile. "Yeah, it is," Hermione agreed. "How about you? Most of the Slytherins looked angry with you at the sorting," she asked. "Oh, don't worry about that. After getting to know me, they lightened up," Harry answered. But Hermione started to say, but he cut her off with a finger gently placed to her lips. "I wish I could talk more with you, Hermione, but I need to hurry to my common room for a meeting," Harry stated, ignoring the blush that was spreading across her face from the close contact. "Huh. Oh sure, maybe we can talk later," she replied shyly. "Sure thing, Hermione, I'll speak to you later," Harry said. Giving her a smile, he turned and walked off into the dungeons. A room built next to the common room had been cleared out and expanded for the council's match. Bleachers had been conjured and now housed the rest of Slytherin House as they cheered and watched the 7 figures standing in the center of the room on a raised stage. Harry and the other council members stood on the platform about to start their free-for-all battle. Snape stood off to the side supervising as his house continued a century-long tradition. As head of house, he would watch and make sure everything turned out fairly, as well as set up barriers to prevent harm from befalling the spectators. Holding up his wand, Snape fired out the set of green sparks that was the signal to begin. Before anyone could even move, a pair of red lights slammed into the chests of Kirsten and Patrick. The two collapsed quickly and all eyes turned to the source of the attacks. On one end stood Harper, who had taken down Patrick, while on the other Harry stood with his wand still out. "Taking out the weakest link as well, Potter?" Harper asked jokingly. "Not really, she just happened to have annoyed me earlier today," Harry replied calmly. Snape smirked. He had expected such speed and skill from Harper for sure. She was a 7th year after all, and her position as council head for the last 4 years hadn't been earned on looks alone. What had surprised him was Potter's skill. He had been watching the boy at the start, and was shocked at the speed he had showed in drawing his wand and firing a spell. The boy's skill in close combat had shocked him as well yesterday, but he had passed it off as something his Muggle relatives had forced him to learn. But now it would seem Potter also had some skill in dueling. Vaisly and Alexov, seeing Harper distracted by her conversation with Harry, drew their wands and fired a volley of stunners at her. Harper managed to dodge the 2 spells and began fighting back. Harry, on the other hand, was fighting against Terence Higgs as the boy threw spell after spell at him. Since the battles were magic only, Terence assumed he had the upper hand against Harry and chose this moment to get his revenge. "Defindo!" he shouted, slashing his wand. Harry rolled to the side to avoid the cutting curse, and as he jumped back up, he jabbed his wand at Terence 3 times. 4-0. 3 thin beams of white light flew towards Terence, who jumped aside to avoid them. The piercing hexes hit the barriers Snape had set up and dissipated into the air. Flicking his wand, Higgs shouted out Flipendo. Protego. The knockback jinx hit Harry's shield and disappeared. Canceling his shield, Harry ducked down as a stunner flew over his head from the battle behind him. Snape frowned watching the fight. Potter had just ducked under a spell that he had not seen coming. Yet another mystery about the boy. As Terence was distracted by the stunner Harry had dodged, the younger boy decided to attack. Disappearing in a blur of movement, he reappeared in front of the boy with his wand held at the ready. Unfortunately, Terence had been prepared this time. Expelliarmus. The disarming charm hit Harry in the shoulder as he tried to dodge. His phoenix wand flew from his hand into Terence's as he was knocked back. Luckily, the sheaths and holster kept his daggers and second wand from flying to the other boy's hand. Higgs grinned down at him in triumph. "Looks like you lose, Potter, but don't think you're getting out of this easily," he sneered, raising his wand. Snape winced as a bludgeoning hex missed Harry's arm by a few inches. Although he was disarmed, he was still conscious and had yet to surrender, so Terence could do whatever he wanted with the boy and no one could stop him. "Stay still and take it like a man, Potter. Without your wand you can't beat me," Terence shouted. Dodging an orange ball of light, Harry put more distance between himself and his opponent. Without his wand he would need to resort to more advanced skills since he couldn't use physical contact in the battle. He momentarily considered using an illusion and knocking the boy out, but that was thrown out the window with Terence's next comment. "If you don't stop moving, I'll just have to take it out on that mudblood whore of yours. Although she'll still be getting what's coming to her even if you do." Terence smirked as Harry stopped moving. Aiming his wand, he prepared to launch a spell at the first year, but all thought of attacking fled his mind as sheer terror filled his body. The entire chamber fell silent as Harry's killer intent filled it. A few whimpered as the desire to run and hide filled them. Snape shuddered under the onslaught of utter malice and bloodlust he felt rolling off Harry. "What is this? Even the Dark Lord never felt this dangerous. It's like I'll die if I even move a muscle." Harry's green eyes flashed as he glared hatefully at the human that would dare to threaten his friends yet again. It took nearly all his occlumency abilities to fight off the urge to tear the boy limb from limb. If he killed a human, no matter how pathetic a human he was, he would most likely be locked up, and being a fugitive on the run was no fun. Taking a single deep breath, Harry reined in his killer intent, more to stop the younger years from killing themselves than to calm Terence, who looked close to assuming the fetal position and crying his fears away. "I warned you once before, Higgs, and I'll warn you once again. The next time you threaten or harm any of my friends, I will kill you," Harry stated icily. Terence, having regained some of his courage from the disappearance of Harry's ki, raised his wand and fired off a spell at the boy. A gasp rang out from the crowd as a wall of blackness rose up in front of Harry. The spell hit the wall and was sucked into it. Snape and many older Slytherins stared at Harry with widened eyes. Unlike the younger years, they clearly recognized what he had just done. "What the hell was that?" Higgs asked in shock. It was Harper who answered him first. "That was shadow magic, a dark and powerful branch of the dark arts that's extremely rare. It's said to be darker than necromancy itself, and it's an ability you have to be born with," she explained. Everyone was now giving Harry curious and awe-filled looks as they heard this. "I don't believe that. Like a first year could master something like that," Terence shouted, firing several more spells, all of which were blocked and absorbed by various walls of shadow. "You can't beat me, Higgs, but I'll tell you something. Harry stated you were correct about this not being shadow magic. Unfortunately, I wasn't born as a shadow mage." Higgs smirked at this. "Then what is it?" Snape asked, his curiosity finally reaching its peak. "This is manipulation of pure darkness. Shadows can only go so far and do so much, but darkness?" Harry replied as a pure black spear formed in the air beside him. "Darkness is infinite." The spear flew through the air too fast to follow. All that was seen was a black blur as it pierced through Terence's shoulder, causing him to scream in pain and drop his wand. The spear disappeared after a moment, leaving a gaping hole in the teen's shoulder. A wave of Harry's hand sent a burst of wind through the arena that lifted Terence up and sent him flying at the wards, rendering him unconscious as he crashed into them. Another wave of his hand had Harry's wand floating back to him. Everyone stared in shock for a moment before Snape regained his senses. The wards were dropped quickly as he rushed to the older teen's side. His eyes widened as he caught a look at the extent of the injury before he levitated the boy off to the side and pulled out several vials of potions that were then forced down Terence's throat. The rest of Slytherin House just continued to stare at Harry, who simply stood in the arena still as a statue as he waited for Snape to finish. Snape meanwhile sighed in relief as the wound stopped bleeding and began to heal. It would be extremely painful, but luckily the teen was already knocked out. The wound would be finished healing in about 2 or 3 hours with minor scarring, but Terence may never be able to use his arm the same way again. He turned back to the arena when he heard someone speak. "Why, you're a windy elementalist?" Weasley stuttered out, staring at Harry. A few gasps rang out in the room. Unlike shadow magic, elemental magic was well known, and although near impossible to master, it was quite common. Every pureblood was tested for an element when they turned 11, so none were really surprised at this fact. What was surprising was the title. One was only called an elementalist after they had mastered their element to perfection. There had only been 8 elementalists ever recorded, and being able to use his element so freely was definitely a hint to Potter being an elementalist. Harry's head cocked to the side as he looked at Weasley. "No, not wind," he replied simply. Snape's eyes widened while the others looked on in confusion. Being an elementalist was unbelievable enough, but if he had understood Potter correctly, then the boy was able to use more than one element. something that was said to be impossible. What elements? He asked silently. Various eyes turned to look at him quizzically. Some of the older students seemed to understand his question and looked back to Harry in shock, but the younger years continued to look on in confusion. What elements can you use? Snape asked again in a shaky tone. He shuddered as the piercing Avada Kedavra green eyes focused on him. Harry seemed to ponder something before a dark grin spread across his face. Snape watched him fearfully as he held up 7 fingers. 7? There were only 4 elements, so he could only look back in confusion. Confusion turned to shock as each finger seemed to glow a different color. All of them, Harry replied calmly. As Snape watched wide-eyed as the fingers were surrounded by a flame, a whirlpool of water, a clod of dirt, a tornado of wind, arching lightning, a ball of light and a ball of darkness. 7 elements, 3 never having been documented before. Snape fainted. Severus? Severus, wake up. Snape heard as he regained consciousness. His eyes snapped open quickly but closed as he was met with blinding whiteness. The hospital wing, he realized, opening his eyes slower this time and sitting up. Ah, Severus, welcome back to the world of the living. What happened to you? A voice asked from beside him. Turning his head, Snape spotted Dumbledore, Madame Pomfrey and McGonagall standing beside his bed. At the foot of his bed were a few of the other teachers looking at him curiously. Headmaster? What happened? He asked weakly. I was hoping you could tell us, Severus, Dumbledore replied. The student that brought you and said you fainted. Snape scowled as a few of the teachers snickered. He fainted? Why would he faint? What could have possible? Potter! Snape suddenly exclaimed. Harry Potter did something to you, Severus? McGonagall asked with a scowl. No, he surprised me. The boy's an elementalist, he replied quickly. A few gasped. Are you sure, Severus? Most students have some control over their element before coming to the school, but a master? Dumbledore asked. I'm sure, Albus, he caused a powerful gust of wind with only a wave of his hand, Snape replied. Whispers broke out within the surrounding audience. A wind master? Curious, I tested Harry's affinity at birth. He was water-oriented like his mother, Dumbledore replied dubiously, giving Snape a questioning look. That's just it. He can control more than one element, Snape replied quickly. I'm not sure his mastery of the others, though. Others, Severus? As in more than 2? Are you sure you saw correctly? Mastering one element is difficult enough, controlling 2 is near impossible, but controlling more than 2? Dumbledore asked with a stern tone. I know what I saw, Albus. The boy can control 7 elements, Snape replied warily. Everyone simply stared at him now, some in shock, others in disbelief. 7, Severus? There are only 4 elements, Dumbledore commented. Perhaps you should rest and clear your mind, Severus. Damn it, Albus. I know what I saw. I'll show you, Snape replied and grabbed his wand from the table before pointing it at the wall. Dumbledore made to stop him but was too slow. Me memoriam. A silver light shot from the tip of the wand and struck the wall. As they all watched, the light spread to form a large silver square that rippled similar to a pensive. As they all watched, Snape's memories filtered through, showing Harry's fight with Terence Higgs. My Severus, why were your students fighting in the first place? McGonagall asked disapprovingly. Co-training duel, it's a Slytherin tradition, Snape replied. The others seemed to ignore his near slip and accept the answer, but Dumbledore nodded in understanding. They watched as the fight progressed. None noticed the silence caused by Harry's killer intent since they couldn't feel it through the memory, but Snape shuddered as he remembered the feeling of utter malice and bloodlust that had flowed off the boy. The memory continued on, and they watched silently until Harry blocked the older boy's spell. Shadow magic? He's a shadow mage? Flitwick asked in shock and slight fear. Snape sneered at the diminutive man, but the question was answered by Harry's response on the screen. Is that even possible, Albus? Controlling darkness itself, McGonagall asked. I don't know, but it must be. Something like that has never been mentioned before, and I know Harry's not a shadow mage. I checked that at his birth as well, Dumbledore replied. They continued to watch, some gasping as they saw Terence's injury, but Madame Pomfrey's rant was cut off as Snape pointed out that the wound had already been taken care of. Finally, the memory got to the part where Harry answered how many elements he could use. Freeze, Snape commanded. That can't be possible, McGonagall stuttered, staring at the 7 glowing fingers. It appears it is quite possible, Minerva. The boy is a multi-elementalist with control over elements never before recorded, Snape replied. But what elements are those? Flitwick asked, squinting at the screen. I easily recognize fire, water, earth, and wind, and that looks like lightning. I agree with you, Phileas, and I think I might know what the last two are, Dumbledore stated sagely. Oh? Snape asked, rolling his eyes. And what, pray tell, do you suppose they are, Albus? He asked. Well, if you take in what young Harry said earlier about his shadow abilities, you can easily figure out that this one must be darkness then, Dumbledore stated, pointing at the finger surrounded by a black orb. Following that line of thought, you can easily guess what the white orb is, he finished. Light. The boy has control over light, McGonagall whispered, but all were able to hear it in the silence of the room. That's correct, Minerva, Dumbledore replied with a twinkle in his eyes. He had been worried when Harry was sent to Slytherin. He had been panicking when he heard the boy could control a corrupting force like darkness, but now that the boy also had power over light, his fears were set aside. After all, no Potter would choose darkness over light. This shouldn't be possible, Albus. No one has ever been able to control two elements, yet alone 7. Snape whispered. Perhaps this is the power the Dark Lord knows not, Dumbledore muttered, quoting the prophecy. A few of the teachers gave him questioning glances, but Snape could only nod. What about your students, Severus? They all know about this. How can we keep this from getting out? Minerva asked. We can't. By now word has most likely spread. We can only hope it doesn't get into the wrong hands, Dumbledore said. Oh, you don't need to worry about that, Headmaster. A voice spoke up from the door. Turning, they all spotted the subject of their conversation standing at the door. Ah, Mr. Potter, so good to see you, Dumbledore stated with a smile. What did you mean about not worrying about that? It would be quite bothersome if word got out about this. I know, Harry stated, taking a step into the room. That's why I made the students in Slytherin House swear an oath of secrecy about this, Harry replied calmly. You got the entire house to swear secrecy oaths? Snape asked skeptically. Yup, Harry nodded with a grin. It'll be like they don't even remember. Snape shuddered at the implications of that statement, but the others didn't seem to notice. Dumbledore was simply watching his little golden boy with that insufferable twinkle in his eye. Thank you for informing us, Mr. Potter, but I'm sure you had an ulterior motive for coming here, Dumbledore stated. Harry turned his eyes away from the headmaster and over to Snape. Ah, yes, sir. I was actually coming to check on Professor Snape and inform him that I won the duels. Snape's jaw dropped slightly, but his mask of apathy was placed back on quickly. You beat Chaskivj, Adams, and Miss Baddock? Although said in a calm tone, the disbelief could be heard in his voice. Yes, I did, sir, though we're distracted by your incapacitation, so I chose to stun them while they were looking away, Harry replied with a grin. Snape could very well tell the boy was lying, but had a good feeling he wouldn't get the truth from him or anyone else. That doesn't seem very fair. Snape snorted as he heard Phileas's comment. Harry simply smiled at the small man and threw a comment over his shoulder before leaving. Well, I am a Slytherin, sir. Dumbledore chuckled. That you are, Harry, but also a Gryffindor. After all, you did stick up for little Miss Granger, did you not? Harry only shrugged and closed the door behind him. None noticed the frown on his face at Dumbledore's comment. Monday, October 7, 1991. Kagebushin no Jutsu, Harry whispered. With a puff of smoke, an exact copy of himself popped into existence right beside him. Giving its creator a nod, the clone made its way back towards the castle for its morning classes. Sighing, Harry entered the forest once more and made his way towards a familiar clearing. He had been using the clone for the last month to skip classes. While he trained and slept in the forest, the clone would attend classes in his place, only switching with him for meals. It would then spend time with his friends and disperse when they were all asleep. His first month at Hogwarts had gone by quickly and uneventfully. After that day in the hospital ward, no one had brought up his elements again. After all, none of the students remembered the incident, and the teachers knew to keep quiet, and although he had noticed Snape keeping a closer eye on him, Harry chose to ignore it for the moment. His duties as head of the Slytherin Council only took up a few minutes on Sundays, but brought him plenty of benefits within the house. All his commands were followed by the others, and anyone he chose as his friend was left alone, no matter how pure their blood may or may not have been. After a week of this, the rest of the house stopped acting like they expected him to curse them for simply looking at him wrong. They still respected him and followed his orders. The women still fawned at him, but he noticed there was now a relaxed atmosphere within the common room. They no longer stiffened or went silent whenever he entered the room, so that was a bonus. His friendships with all his friends had also grown to higher levels. They still treated him respectfully, but there was less distance now, and they joked around with him again. Although she wasn't with them much, Hermione was welcome within the group. She had even become friends with Daphne and Pansy, who were trying to make her more Slytherin-like since she had the skill, although her blood wasn't as pure as they would like. The classes were also fairly easy for him, and Harry was already being acclaimed as a prodigy of magic. With his eyes he was able to copy and cast any spell just by seeing the teacher's example, and he never needed to study since everything was easily memorized. He currently held top marks in all his classes except for Transfiguration with the Gryffindors. He and Hermione were both tied for first place in that class, although there was still time for one of them to fall behind. One major annoyance that had popped up was the red-headed Weasley boy, Rudolph? Reginald? Something with an R. He didn't bother remembering the boy's name, and it always upset him when they spoke. The boy had become a sort of leader for the first-year Gryffindors, and with his biased views he had turned most of his yearmates against the Slytherins. The only ones that didn't join him were Hermione, Neville, and all the girls who had fallen victim to Harry's demonic allure. Their constant attempts to get a date with him was one of the reasons he had decided to start sending a clone in his place. Landing in his clearing, Harry returned to his daily exercises. His body was already close to peak form for someone his age, and his magic control was still near perfect. Harry spent most of his time either running up and down trees in the Forbidden Forest while practicing and mastering jutsu, or running across the lake at night while working on his hand-seal speed. Whenever he finished his exercises, he would sit for a few hours and meditate while sorting the memories his clones would send from time to time. Deeper into the forest, he had several clones practicing and mastering spells and jutsu, while a few hinged or invisible clones were scouring the school's library. A rustle to the side alerted him of yet another creature. Spreading his senses, he identified it as a passing acromantula. Strange, since most creatures in the forest stayed far away from his two clearings. He had crossed paths with a few centaurs while in here, but they had chosen to go the other way rather than speak with him. The other non-intelligent creatures avoided him like the plague. The only creatures that did come near him whenever he was around were the Thestrals. They would come from time to time to watch him train or to play with him whenever he had the time. Their presence mixed with his also kept the unicorns far away from the clearings. Harry frowned as a new memory was sent by the clone. It would seem young Ricardo Weasley was really aching to have his head removed. "Give it here, Malfoy," the arrogant redhead demanded. Harry sighed as he watched Weasley try and fail to intimidate Draco. It was their first flying class, and the teacher had just left to escort Neville to the infirmary after the boy had fallen off his broom. Draco had just picked up Neville's remembrall, and before he had spoken, Weasley had dragged his pompous ass over and demanded he hand it over. Harry sighed at the boy's arrogance. It would have been understandable if Weasley had any skills or intelligence to back it up, but as he was right now, the boy was worse than Crabbe and Goyle. At least they served as muscle for the group. "Pass it over, Draco." Harry peeked up. Smirking at Weasley, Draco tossed the small orb over to Harry, who studied. "Hand it over, Potter. It doesn't belong to you slimy snakes," Weasley demanded arrogantly. "Why should I, Reginald? It doesn't belong to you either," Harry replied in a bored tone. "For the last time, my name is Ron." "If you say so, Reuben," Harry smirked as the boy seethed. "Either way, that ball belongs to Neville. Hand it over," Weasley demanded once more. Studying the ball yet again, Harry simply shrugged. "Okay." Weasley grinned arrogantly at getting his way. He stretched out a hand, waiting for the remembrall to be handed over. Harry studied his hand for a moment before ignoring it and handing the ball to Hermione. The girl gave him a grateful smile and tucked it away in her pocket. Weasley scowled at the both of them before grumbling and walking away. Thursday, October 31st, 1991. "Oh, Harry!" two voices shouted. Turning, Harry spotted a pair of red-haired twins making their way over to him. They were currently in the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, and the twins had interrupted them on their walk to the Slytherin table. "Can I help you?" Harry asked politely. Around him, the rest of the group grabbed their wands in case the twin Weasleys wanted to start something. "Nice to finally meet you. I'm Fred." "And I'm George." They both spoke in alternating sentences. "We just wanted to let you know that, unlike little Ronnikins, we don't hate you just because you're Slytherins." "Are okay?" Harry replied. Their strange way of speaking was really starting to get on his nerves. "As such, we hope you will place all blame on him when we impart this piece of information on you." Harry frowned before studying the two boys. From their stance, they were quite nervous, but at the same time they were ready to deal with anything that should happen. He was impressed with their preparedness, considering they were Gryffindors. "Very well, what did Rudy do this time?" he asked calmly. Ronald may have said. Something rude to your friend. Hermione, which may have caused her to miss a day of class by crying in the girls' washroom. The twins and the rest of the group shuddered as Harry's killer intent spiked momentarily. His eyes flashed as they sought out the cause of his friend's grief. The twins studied him curiously as his eyes locked onto the form of Ron Weasley at the other end of the hall and narrowed. Before Harry could do anything though, the doors to the hall were blasted open and Quirrell came sprinting in. Harry watched as the man ran halfway to the high table and shouted out, "Troll! In the dungeons, thought you should know." Before he promptly fainted, or at least pretended to. With his keen skills, Harry could clearly see the faint emotion that flickered across the teacher's face. Mostly annoyance, fear and urgency. The man was waiting for them to leave so he could proceed elsewhere. Daphne's voice drew him out of his thoughts. "Oh no, Hermione doesn't know about the troll. What should we do, Harry?" It was at this time that the rest of the group noticed that he had disappeared. "Where did he go? He was here a second ago," Draco asked curiously. "Never mind that. We need to find Hermione," the twins chorused. Nodding, the Slytherins banded with the two Gryffindors and ran for the first-floor washrooms. Harry cursed as he heard a scream from down the hall, followed by a loud smash. He could already feel the presence of the troll. The mid-tier demon kind was just a few more meters down the hall. He could also sense another presence near the troll, a familiar one. Hermione. Pushing more magic into his body, Harry blasted down the hallway. Up ahead was the closed door to the girls' bathroom, and the smashing sounds could be heard from within. Jumping as he neared the room, Harry slammed into the large wooden door foot first. The door was blasted off its hinges and sent flying into the bathroom, where it exploded against the wall. Sliding across the floor, Harry looked around the room quickly as he came to a stop. Following a train of destroyed sinks and stalls, he spotted Hermione at the far end of the room, shaking as she sat in the corner. Standing above her was the large grey troll holding its club in the air, prepared to strike. Harry saw red. His mental defenses were blown away as his bloodlust and anger rose to the surface. Nothing else mattered to him except for the pathetic creature that would dare harm his friend. Releasing a rage-filled cry, Harry rushed at the troll as its club descended. Hermione saw Harry running towards her, but the distance was far too wide for him to make it. Giving him a sad smile, she closed her eyes and waited for the blow to come. The troll never even saw him coming. As the club began to descend, Harry poured more of his magic into his body. Closing the distance quickly, he jumped up all 7 feet and landed on the creature's shoulder. His hand snaked out and caught the troll's wrist as it fell past. With a powerful kick-off, Harry tore the arm right off the beast at the shoulder. Flipping mid-air, he landed feet first on the wall and clung there. It had happened so fast that it took the creature a few moments to even notice. In fact, the only reason it noticed was due to the fact its blood had sprayed all over the wall and drenched its assailant. The creature looked from the rage-filled eyes of Harry Potter to its arm and then to its stump of a shoulder, and did the only thing it could do. It reared back its large head and gave a pain-filled roar. Smash! A roar that was cut off as Harry swung the large club and arm he was holding onto. The weapon crashed right into the troll's face, knocking out several teeth and breaking its nose. At this point, Hermione had opened her eyes and could only stare in shock as a blood-soaked Harry stood on the wall and beat the troll with its own weapon, a weapon that was at least twice his size, not counting the arm it was attached to. Another swing hit the troll in the chest, causing it to stumble back a few steps from pain. Seeing as the beast was now out of range for his wide, clumsy swings, Harry tossed the arm and club to the side and drew one of his daggers. The troll, having regained its balance, roared and swung its remaining arm in a punch. Crouching against the wall, Harry left behind spiderweb cracks as he blasted off at the creature's torso. As he passed the large swinging arm, he used it as leverage to flip over and land on the troll feet first. The beast didn't even have time to notice that its target had moved from the wall before a large blade of condensed wind cut through the bicep of its remaining arm. The arm dropped to the ground as blood spewed from the newly made wound. Ignoring the movement as the creature thrashed around in pain, Harry ran up its stomach and chest quickly. Reaching its neck, he raised his dagger far above his head and slammed it home in the troll's right eye. The dagger sank all the way down to the hilt, cutting through the tissue and muscle easily. Before the troll even noticed the 12 inches of enchanted steel in its head, Harry had already drawn his second dagger and sunk it hilt deep into the troll's left ear. The creature continued to bellow and flail about in pain, but Harry clung on tightly with his feet. As the troll stumbled back a step, it seemed to lose its balance due to the blood on the floor and threatened to fall. A well-placed and solid punch to the face by Harry had it tipping over backwards. Quick as he could, Harry gripped both hilts tightly and jumped over the troll's shoulder. The force of his pull twisted its head quickly, and he was rewarded with a satisfying crack as the creature's neck snapped before it hit the ground with a loud crash. The death of the troll snapped Harry out of his blood rage. Taking a deep breath, he exhaled all the pent-up energy in his body and relaxed. A whimper from behind reminded him of Hermione. Turning around, he spotted her still sitting in the corner. While the two walls to her sides were splashed with the troll's blood and the floor around her was covered in it, she was relatively unharmed and clean. She simply sat there and stared at him with wide eyes. Taking a step forward, Harry gave her a reassuring smile. "Are you okay, Hermione?" he asked softly. This seemed to break her out of her daze as she cried out and clung on to him sobbing. Harry, not sure how to deal with a crying human female, could only pat her on the back and whisper reassurances. There, Hermione, no one's ever going to hurt you while I'm around," he whispered softly. A gasp interrupted them as several people rushed into the room. First and foremost were Snape, Quirrell, Dumbledore, Flitwick and McGonagall, followed by Fred, George, Draco, Blaise, Crabbe, Goyle, Theo, Pansy, Millie and Daphne. McGonagall had gasped while the others simply stared at the destruction. They looked over the broken stalls and sinks, the cracks on the wall, the splashes and puddles of blood, the torn/cut-off arms of the troll, the dead troll itself, a crying Hermione Granger, and staring back at them with eerie luminescent green eyes was a blood-soaked Harry Potter. "My gods, Harry, did you do this?" Dumbledore muttered as he regained his senses. Glaring at them, Harry stood and walked over to the troll. They watched as he grabbed the two hilts of his daggers. A few recoiled as the twin blades were pulled out with a sickening squelch. "What took you so long?" Harry asked calmly, staring at the group. What?" McGonagall stuttered in confusion. Harry glared at them. "I'm asking what took you so long. If it hadn't been for me, Hermione here would have died. It's your responsibility as teachers to look out for your students," he growled. The eyes of the professors widened while the other students were looking at Harry in shock, mostly for his attitude and lack of respect towards the faculty. "I apologize, Mr. Potter. You have to understand that we thought the troll was in the dungeons. We also had to make sure the students knew what to do. Had we known Miss Granger was in any danger at all, we would have rushed here with all speed," Dumbledore replied calmly. Harry simply scoffed. It was at this time that a familiar scent reached his nostrils. It only took him a moment to identify it. Quirrell and Snape shuddered as his bright green eyes rounded on them in anger. "And what, pray tell, were the two of you doing on the third floor then? For that matter, Quirrell, what were you doing in the dungeons during the feast?" he growled out angrily. Snape looked shocked as his eyes flickered down to his leg before turning back to Harry. "And what makes you believe we were anywhere near the third floor, Mr. Potter?" he drawled out while Quirrell was reduced to a stuttering mess. "I know what's on the third floor, Snape, and you reek of him," he replied with a glare. "That's neither here nor there, Mr. Potter. How did you know where the troll and Miss Granger were located, and for that matter, how did you defeat a troll and leave it in such a condition?" McGonagall cut it. Harry's attention turned to her as his anger rounded on her. "How is it you didn't know she was here? You're her head of house, yet you didn't notice one of your students was out of class all day and was crying inside the bathroom. Due to a comment caused by another one of your students, may I add," he growled. McGonagall seemed to be taken back by his statement, and could only look down in shame. "I understand why you would be angry, Harry, but could you at least tell us how you were able to defeat the troll?" Dumbledore asked, attempting to change the subject. Harry simply snorted before turning to help Hermione to her feet. "That's none of your business. Now, unless you professors want to display more of your uselessness, you will stand aside so I can escort my friend to the hospital wing," he snapped angrily. Everyone immediately moved aside and allowed him to help Hermione out of the room. The students sent one look to the teachers before following him out. Once they had all gone, Dumbledore sighed and turned to the staff. "As rude as he may have been, Mr. Potter was right. This could have ended worse with the death of a student. Let us hope Miss Granger can overcome this ordeal," he stated softly before turning to Snape and Quirrell. "Now then, why were the two of you on the third floor during all this?" Snape shot a look at Quirrell before answering. "I was making sure no one made an attempt on the item during the commotion, Headmaster," he answered calmly. "MMETT2HH, Headmaster," Quirrell stuttered out. Dumbledore simply hummed in response. "Very well, let's clean this mess up," he stated, pointing to the troll. "Oh, and Severus, be sure to reward young Mr. Potter 50 points for his heroics." By the next day, word had quickly spread about Harry's achievement. The paintings within the school saw his blood-soaked form as they went to the hospital wing, and had spread the word around, allowing students to overhear. And although none really knew how he had defeated the troll, rumors spread quickly. Hermione, being the only witness, was mobbed constantly by curious students, but all she could say was that it had happened too fast for her to see. Harry's new claim to fame had garnered more respect and favor for him with the student body, but he still had to deal with the jealous, hate-filled looks Weasley sent him and the subtle insults from Higgs and his group about Harry saving a mudblood or acting like a Gryffindor. Unfortunately, Higgs toed the line, so Harry didn't have much just cause to kill the boy, and it took all his composure and patience not to rip Higgs apart like he had the troll. After having rescued her, Hermione had taken to spending more and more time at his side. She would even join him at the Slytherin table some days for meals. He didn't really mind that, but the fact that she would blush and stutter every time he spoke a word or acknowledged her was getting annoying. He had already toned down his allure as much as possible, but she only improved slightly. Eventually time passed, and she returned to normal, or at least close to it. Tuesday, November 5, 1991. Harry was currently deciding what to do about the third floor. Obviously there was something there that Quirrell wanted. After all, the man had let a troll inside the school as a distraction. Perhaps it was that demonic item he felt. Well, if so, that meant only one thing. He would need to get it before Quirrell did. Quite frankly, he didn't care what it was or what it did, but if Quirrell wanted it, then that was more than enough reason to take it. The man had almost gotten Hermione killed with that troll stunt. He had tried to take away something that was his, Harry's, so he would need to reciprocate in the same manner by taking something Quirrell wanted. Something he could dangle in front of the man before tearing his soul from his body. Grinning darkly, Harry chuckled to himself as he drifted off to sleep. Friday, November 15, 1991. Harry grinned darkly as he made his way to the 7th floor. It was finally time to claim whatever was stored behind that barrier. Apparently the twins had noticed him walking around there the many times he had acknowledged the call and come up. They had showed him some strange map that followed the movements of everyone in the school. Harry had immediately fallen in love with such a perfect tool and had come close to begging the twins to share it with him. But he was a demon. Demons did not beg. Luckily, said twins had great preservation skills and had agreed to share the map with him as long as he committed a few pranks with them from time to time. Harry had eagerly agreed, and after some prodding from the twins had also told them why he spent so much time in that location. It was after this that they had shared the secret to the room. The room of requirement. A/N. I know that the twins knew nothing about the room before Dobby told Harry about it, but my story, my rules, tongue sticking out. After receiving the information from his clone, Harry had immediately made his way out of the forest and into the castle. His other clone was currently in bed pretending to sleep so he would have an alibi should any teachers come across him. Grinning widely, Harry began pacing in front of the door, chanting over and over in his head. I want to find what's calling to me. I want to find what's calling to me. I want to find what's calling to me. It was after his third lap that the room appeared. His eyes showed as the tear in space seemed to glow brightly before ripping open and revealing a multicolored void. It was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen, and took all his willpower to withdraw the magic in his eyes and return his vision to normal. Entering the room, Harry was met with junk. Junk, and more junk filled the room. To one side was a pile of broken furniture, to the other thousands and thousands of books, all with rips, tears, and graffiti. In front of him, the piles of junk continued on, with each pile containing different items. Harry sighed to himself. If it wasn't for the fact that he could sense what he sought, he would have been in here for years searching. In fact, now that he had entered the room, he could sense several more items. None were demonic in nature or called to him like the first, but he could sense a few items that contained powerful magic within them. The closest item was off to the side, but before Harry could even consider going after it, the call increased in strength. Fine, I'm coming for you, he snapped mentally. Somehow it seemed to hear him and returned to a light hum at the back of his mind. Following his senses, Harry maneuvered his way through various piles of junk as he made his way closer and closer to the item that called him. It was between a large blood-stained axe and a pile of rusting swords that he found it. Sitting on top of a stand and humming slightly was a pure white egg. An egg that was calling to him to touch it, to hold it, to hatch it. Almost absent-mindedly, Harry reached out, answering the call. Inch by inch his hand moved forward until his finger grazed the egg. That slight contact was enough for the egg to jump and land inside his hand. The second he grasped it, he began to feel his magic pour out of his body through his hand. No matter what he did, his energy continued to spill out of his body and into the egg until he was nearly drained. As soon as the egg stopped sucking his power, Harry dropped to his knees, breathing heavily. He took a look at the egg and noticed that it had gone from pure white to a dark blue. As he watched, a crack spread across the egg before many cracks joined it, and soon the egg broke open to reveal the creature inside. Harry gasped as Juubi's knowledge on said creature filled his mind, a creature that was thought to be extinct, one that had last been seen 4,700 years ago. There had only been a handful of said creatures in existence, and they were known by many names: the Oceanus Rex, Sea Kings, Serpent Lords, Devourers, and Energy Eaters. They were creatures of pure energy given form like the Bijou, They lived off the energy of other creatures growing to immense sizes as they aged. But for all their power, they were creatures of the sea and couldn't survive on land, that is, unless they bonded with a creature of the land and shared a sort of symbiotic relationship. Harry grinned down at the dark blue sea serpent as he felt it bond with his core. The creature was 5 inches wide, 13 inches long, and covered from head to tail in razor-sharp blue scales that would harm any but the bonded. It had a slightly rounded head with 2 black eyes that stared at him from under its scales, as well as a long mouth that stretched from one side of its head to the other. Inside said mouth were rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth. Reaching out, he grabbed a hold of it, and could feel the warmth it gave off as some of its energy flowed into him and his into it. Master /. Harry blinked as it hissed towards him, but immediately understood. Sea or land, all serpents spoke the same language. Hello little guy. He cooed. Sorry it took me so long to come find you. He added, allowing it to slither up his arm as wrap around it. It's okay master, I'm glad you finally answered my call. The serpent hissed. There was another many years ago, but he never came for me. Well, I'm here now. Why don't you tell me your name, little one? Harry replied. I don't have a name, master. You haven't given me one yet. Sitting in thought for a moment, Harry tried to think of a name for his new companion. Like his cat Yujito, he had thought of perhaps naming it after someone from Naruto's past that would fit closely. But the only fit was another Oceanus Rex Naruto had come across many times, but he couldn't very well name a serpent Samahata. Shark Skin was such an unfitting name for his little serpent. Grinning, Harry decided on a name, and made the translations. Your name will be Hebihata. He hissed softly. It means snake skin. The serpent's magic pulsed as it hissed gleefully at the new name. Grinning, Harry stood up and looked around the room. There were still several more objects calling out to him. Wonder what else I'll find in here, he stated. Turning, he followed the closest signature. I wonder how the others are doing. XX flashback XX. Thursday, November 7, 1991. Sorting the last of his clone's memories, Harry opened his eyes and came out of his meditative state. It was nighttime in the forest, and he could feel a new presence on the grounds, something he had felt growing stronger and stronger over the past few days before finally spiking today. Hopping up, he created a clone to continue practicing before stealthily making his way towards the source. This eventually brought him to Hagrid's hut, where he could sense the new presence within. Quietly crawling across the ground, Harry made his way close to a nearby window. A peek inside the hut revealed Hagrid sitting around the table with Hermione and Neville. On top of said table was the source of the presence. A dragon? Harry screamed in his mind. What the hell was Hagrid doing with a dragon? Harry? Hagrid's voice boomed. Harry gasped and stumbled back a step. He had been so distracted by the baby dragon that he had completely forgotten about the 3 people in the hut. The sound of the door opening drew his attention to Hagrid. Hey Hagrid, how's it going? Harry asked, giving him a smile. Hagrid gave him a curious look. I'm alright, Harry. What are you doing out there? The half-giant asked. Well, I just came down to see you, but when I heard some voices I decided to look in the window and see if you were busy, Harry lied. Hagrid was still looking at him curiously, so he decided to change the subject quickly. Is that a dragon in there, Hagrid? Hagrid's eyes widened before darting inside the hut and back to him. Why don't you come inside, Harry? He offered. XX flashback and XX. With Harry's clone around the same time that Hebihata was hatching. Are you sure this will work? Harry whispered. Don't worry about it. My cousin said they'd be here, so they'll be here. Blaise replied in a hushed tone as well. He, Blaise, and Draco were currently on the astronomy tower with little baby Norbert in the cage behind them. Harry, after Hermione's incessant pleading, had agreed to look for a way to have Norbert safely taken to a preserve. Blaise had offered his cousin's help when Harry had asked the group. After much arguing from Hermione, Hagrid had finally accepted the fact he couldn't keep the dragon. He had agreed to send Norbert off, but in his happiness-induced mutterings had spilled the beans on Fluffy, or as Harry knew him, the Cerberus on the 3rd floor. Harry was almost tempted to kiss Hermione right there. Thanks to her, he now had a surefire way of getting past that Cerberus. Well, without painting the walls with its intestines. As they waited on the rooftop for the dragon handlers, a henge clone within the castle dispersed. Information flooded into his mind from the clone. Apparently Weasley had somehow found out about the dragon and was bringing McGonagall to them in order to get the Slytherins in trouble. A quick hand sign when his friends weren't looking created a second clone that rushed down the tower stairs. A moment later, a genjutsu was set up to keep the two walking around in circles. A sound from Draco alerted him to the four figures rapidly approaching them on brooms. Harry smiled as Nicoli Zabini and his friends flew off carrying baby Norbert. Well, that was rewarding, Draco stated, holding up the bag of galleons they had been paid for the dragon. Harry smirked, patting his pocket. Yes, it was. Inside his pocket, 2 vials of dragon blood clinked together. Back with the real Harry. Slash, it's over there, master. Slash. Slash, thanks Hebe, I've got a lock on it now. Slash. Turning the corner, Harry finally found what he was searching for. On top of a pile of broken busts, Harry spotted what had been releasing the magic he had sensed. It was an old discolored tiara that seemed to have a sinister air around it. Pouring more magic into his eyes, Harry focused on the tiara. He almost gasped at what he saw. Not only was the item surrounded by an aura of malevolent magic, it also had a soul. Unlike living creatures, though, this soul was pure black in color instead of white or gray, and seemed to be fighting against its container, as if it wanted nothing more than to escape and go elsewhere but couldn't. He watched it for a few moments more before something seemed to spring up in his mind. He had seen this soul before. Or at least one that was similar to but where? Quirrell. Harry grinned. Perhaps there was more to the human than he first thought. Obviously this had nothing to do with that waste of space Quirrell, but instead the other creature that was inhabiting his body. Yes, it made sense now. This was either a soul-based creature that possessed items and people in order to survive, or these souls were all parts of a whole. Various rituals on soul-splitting flew through Harry's mind as he smirked at the tiara. Walking up to the tiara, he called upon his magic, and behind him he felt the familiar figure of the outer path rise from the ground. Reaching out, Harry grabbed hold of the soul within the tiara and pulled. Since the soul had already been trying to flee, it surrendered easily and allowed him to pull it out of the tiara. The second it was free, though it tried to escape, but Harry held it tightly. Forcing his power onto the soul, Harry watched as it began to shift and change until the small black ball he held had become a transparent, tall black-haired teen who glared at him with piercing black eyes. "Unhand me, boy," the teen snared, but Harry simply gave him a blank stare. "Who are you?" Harry asked calmly. "I said unhand me or face the consecu." The boy was cut off as the outer path was made visible to him. His eyes widened in fear as he stared at the soul-eating demon. What the hell is that?" he stuttered out fearfully. Harry smirked. "That is my outer path, a devourer of souls. Now you will answer my questions, or I will allow you to spend eternity rotting away within its stomach," he replied in a low tone. The teen nodded his head rapidly as he tried to tear his eyes away from the hypnotic ripples of the outer path, but too late. His eyes glazed over as Harry cast a powerful hypnosis over him. "Who are you?" Harry asked again. "My name was Tom Marvolo Riddle," the boy repeated monotonously as the hypnosis took effect. "Was? I later chose a new name to go by, Lord Voldemort." Interesting, Harry thought with a grin. That would explain why the soul is pure black and filled with sin. "You're not the real Voldemort, though, just a fragment of his soul. What are you really?" he asked out loud. "I am what's known as a Horcrux," the teen replied. The second he thought, the word information on Horcrux and the ritual to create them came to the front of his mind. Harry simply scoffed as he reviewed the knowledge. How pathetic that even millenniums after his death the descendant of Orochimaru would continue his vile ancestor's search for immortality. He had even gone so far as to mutilate his very soul in order to achieve it, something the Sannin had done as well, but not to this degree. "How many Horcrux of you are there?" Harry asked. The ritual said more than one could be created, and a man like Voldemort would most likely try for more. "There were only 3 others when this one was created. I had planned on making 7 altogether," Tom replied. 7? Oh gods, to think someone would mutilate their soul to such a degree. It was disgusting. Humans were so pathetic in their search for immortality. Why would anyone want to live so long? Even though he would never die unless he chose to or was killed, Harry still found the thought of living forever to be undesirable. Watching as your friends and loved ones pass you by was not something he wanted. Unfortunately, he was cursed with immortality, and he would live on until death claimed him. "Why would you mutilate your soul to such a degree?" he asked Tom. "I wanted to be immortal. My greatest fear is death, and by creating more Horcruxes I ensured that I would never die. I chose 7 because it is the most powerful number in arithmancy," Tom replied in his dazed voice. Harry frowned at this but was distracted as a sudden thought popped into his mind. "Creating human Horcruxes is said to be impossible, yet a fragment of your soul is attached to Quirrell. Did you find a way to make a human Horcrux?" he asked quickly. "Not before this one was created. I may have discovered the way afterwards, though. I would have said that this Quirrell fellow was simply being possessed by one of my souls, but considering that you yourself are also a Horcrux, I may have discovered the way," Tom replied. "What? What do you mean I'm a Horcrux?" Harry shouted angrily. Tom simply remained impassive and dazed as he replied, "A fragment of my soul is attached to yours. Each Horcrux can feel the others." Growling, Harry decided he would get to the source of this matter quickly. Pulling his power back, he watched as the form of Tom Riddle returned to the small black ball. A moment later, the ball seemed to shrink in on itself and harden until a small black crystal was formed. Depositing the crystal into his pocket, Harry closed his eyes and focused on his body. He immediately fell into a familiar meditative trance, but rather than stop at his core, Harry delved deeper and deeper until he reached his soul. That's where he spotted it. Like most demons and magical creatures, his soul was a set color based on his alignment. Light creatures had pure white souls, neutrals had gray souls, and dark creatures had black souls. As a pure demon, Harry's soul was pitch black, the blackest of blacks. His soul was so dark that even Voldemort's soul fragment stood out in contrast. He spotted the small soul shard as it was surrounded by a slight bit of magical power. He had expected the soul to be fighting against his soul in an attempt to gain control of his body, but surprisingly, the soul was actually fighting to keep Harry's soul away from it. Of course, as if the soul of a human was anything in comparison to that of a demon's. Harry grinned. Concentrating slightly on Voldemort's soul fragment, Harry turned the full power of his own soul against it. The little soul was quickly overwhelmed and destroyed under the power of his own soul. There was a brief high-pitched scream of pain and rage accompanied by a flare of pain on his forehead as the soul vanished. Unfortunately, now that it was dead and gone, he had no chance to question what was most likely the newest and most knowledgeable fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. Sighing to himself, Harry withdrew from his consciousness as opened his eyes. Well, that was interesting, he thought to himself as he snapped out of the trance. A twinge of pain made him wince and grab his forehead, but all he could feel was wetness as the scar healed over. Drawing his hand away, he frowned when he saw it was covered in blood, meaning that the soul must have somehow been attached to his scar. Ugh, how do I explain having a scar one day and not having it the next? Harry thought, annoyed at this occurrence. Harry strolled once more through the room of requirement as he sought out the next source of magic. His hands still dripped blood as he walked, but a powerful illusion was now in place on his forehead. For all the world knew, his scar was still there, and would remain there until Voldemort was finally and completely dead. Grinding his teeth, Harry continued his search for whatever item was next on the list. It was already well into the night, and Hebihada had fallen asleep an hour after they began searching. Harry continued to follow after the magical signature that he could sense, but the room was just so damn big, it seemed to stretch on forever, putting him farther and farther from the other signatures as he followed up on this one. It was finally after a 15-minute trek to the top of a mountain of jewelry that Harry found what he sought. Sitting within a small wooden box were 4 large gold rings and 2 smaller silver rings. One of the gold rings had a large oval ruby in the center. On each side of the ruby was a small lion engraved onto the gold band. Each lion was drawn so that it stood on its 2 rear paws while the front 2 held onto the stone. The second gold ring had a small round emerald in the center. There was a long snake engraving that spun around the emerald so the tip of the tail touched the tip of the head, and there was a smaller emerald in place of its eye. The first silver ring, on the other hand, had a triangular yellow quartz stone set at the top with what looked like a badger or weasel stretched out beneath it. The final ring had a square deep blue sapphire held in the talons of a raven with its wings stretched out and wrapping all around the band. Carved into the inside of each ring were small one-word engravings: Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw. Harry gaped as he read this. Each ring had belonged to the founders. But then what would they be doing in here? And together? No, something was strange about the rings. For one thing, it most likely had to do with the powerful aura of power they were releasing. One would need to be in tune with the various forms of chakra, natural, elemental, spiritual, physical, etc., to find it, but it was there. Concentrating as much as he could, Harry saw a strange sort of bubble surrounding each ring and concealing their true forms from his eyes. Gathering his magic, he attacked each bubble with as much strength as he could muster. The small barriers seemed to hold for a moment before they cracked and collapsed under the weight of his assault. Taking a moment to catch his breath, Harry looked at the true forms of the rings once more and gasped. That can't be possible, but how? Instead of the 4 ornate rings he had once held, there were now 4 plain identical silver rings. The only difference between each ring was the stone they held. Each held a different colored stone with a word engraved on the front. The words were engraved in an ancient form of kanji, but thanks to his memories he was able to read them easily. A red jewel with the kanji for scarlet. A green jewel with the kanji for boar. A yellow jewel with the kanji for south. A blue jewel with the kanji for north. 4 of the 10 Akatsuki rings lay before him. Harry could only stare. The rings were over 5 millenniums old, but here they lay as perfect and undamaged as they had been when Naruto had collected them and spread them far and wide. Oh, he had tried to destroy them like he had that accursed statue, but the rings had proven to be indestructible no matter what he tried. Naruto had never found out why that was. But Harry knew. Oh yes, he knew what these rings were. He had read all about them in the ancient texts found inside the restricted section. Ancient magical artifacts said to be no more than a myth from days long gone. The rings of the Mandarin. 10 rings created by a wizard of extreme power, and keyed only to his magical signature. When used by the Mandarin, the rings each had extreme power, and granted separate abilities, but could only be used by the Mandarin himself. The rings though were sought out for a separate reason by wizards far and wide. Each ring was created from Diagon, an unbelievably rare magical compound that could only be created though an ancient recipe that had been lost to all for eons. Only 2 items were said to contain Diagon, the rings being grouped together as one item, and it was rumored that a shard of Diagon was included in the core of the Elder Wand. Diagon was highly sought after since it was indestructible, and was said to be the most powerful magical amplifier in the world. Simply having Diagon on your person, no matter how big or small, would increase your power tenfold. Harry grinned widely as he stared down at the priceless items before him. Picking up the red ring that had at one time belonged to both Uchiha Itachi and Godric Gryffindor, Harry calmly slipped it onto his right ring finger. The kanji glowed briefly and he felt something touch upon his core and threw that on Hebihata, but he felt no difference. Frowning slightly, Harry decided to test it. Waving his hand, he poured enough power into his hand to casually create a light breeze. He was shocked when gale force winds raged through the room and knocked over several items, clearing a path in front of him. Harry looked down at the ring and grinned darkly. Unfortunately, due to its nature, no matter how much Diagon he had, his power would only be increased by the same amount. While this gave him 3 other rings to split among allies, he would need to find those he trusted implicitly before something like that could ever occur. Grinning wider at his luck, Harry stared lovingly at the ring on his hand before slipping the others into his pocket. Jumping off the mountain of jewelry, Harry made his way towards the final source of chakra he was sensing. Luckily, this item was far closer than the other one, and he could reach it within minutes. Walking briskly through the piles of junk, Harry studied his ring fondly. His eyes allowed him to see how his magic would flow into the Diagon, and would be condensed more and more before being released back into his body, strengthening it. It was after a few minutes that he arrived at his location. Strangely, he had made a full circuit around the room and was now standing beside the large pile of books by the door. Raising an eyebrow at the location of his next item, Harry hurriedly jumped into the pile of books and began searching for the source of the powerful chakra. He would dig and dig, but he never seemed to get closer. The books would just keep getting in the way, but Harry continued his frantic search. This next item, whatever it was, almost as powerful as the rings he now held, and was releasing more magic than Hebihata had. Whatever it was powerful. It was after half an hour of searching that he finally reached the bottom of the pile. Most of the books here were ancient, and the only thing keeping them together was the magic of the room itself. Whatever it was he was searching for was over a century old at the least. Harry could feel it underneath a small pile of books now. He was searching through them carefully lest he damage it, but he could feel more and more of its power flowing into the air as he uncovered it. Finally, he lifted the last book out of the was, a large tome written in a strange language. Then he saw it. Lying at his feet was the item he had searched so frantically for. Twitch. Arf. Screaming in rage, Harry stomped out of the room, slamming the door behind him as hard as he could. He needed to get to the forest and kill something quickly. Back in the room, laying in the center of a pile of discarded books, was a small little book that seemed to give off an ethereal glow as it radiated with power. On the front of the book were 3 words written in ancient Japanese. Ika Ika Paradise. What if Juubi Naruto was in Harry Potter? End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.